Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2.
I understand this is our last meeting.
Recording in progress.
Okay. You want to do a roll call?
Okay. Thank you, Chair Martin. This meeting is being held virtually and in person, so I will do a roll call of all the trustees to confirm attendance. Ms. Martin?
Here.
Mr. Moore?
Here.
Ms. Gray? Nancy DeRozo? Ms. Ginsburg?
Here.
Mr. Green?
Present.
Ms. Mee?
Here.
BOR is Nancy DeRozo, Vivian Gray, and Wayne Moore. BOI, Jason Green, Ms. Martin, and Ms. Mee. Ex officio is Elizabeth Ginsburg. Staff participating in the meeting include Chief Executive Officer Santos Kryman, Deputy CEO Luis Lugo, Assistant Executive Officers JJ Popovich and Laura Guglielmo, CIO John Grable, Chief Audit Executive Richard Fiddle, Chief Counsel Steve Rice, Senior Staff Counsel Allison Barrett. Internal audit staff include Alicia Collins, Christina Logan, Nate Amick, Gabriel Tafoya, and Christina Sun. And all division managers. Consultants, Christina Hunt and Amanda Kronk from Plant Moran, Cindy Gross and Priya Kumar from Moss Adams, Audit Committee Consultant, Larry Jensen. Trustees, please use your raise your hand Zoom option to be placed in the queue. At this time, we ask that all meeting participants to mute their mics until you are ready to speak. And now we may proceed with the agenda.
Trustee Green, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure.
Thank you.
Of the United States of America, and to the republics for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So anybody on the teleconferencing today?
None.
None? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the September meeting?
So moved.
Okay, thank you.
I'll take the roll call. Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Razo,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Mee,
Aye.
Ms. Martin.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, we're going to move on to any public comment.
None at this time.
Thank you. Okay. To item 6A, non-consent items. And there's a presentation.
Yeah, good morning, Chair Martin and trustees of the committee. I will be asking the committee to approve amendments to our fiscal year 2025 audit plan. Attachment A in your package shows the audit plan that you approved at the September meeting. Attachment B shows our requested red line changes to the plan. And attachment C shows the clean revised plan should the committee approve it. I'll go further into why we're requesting the changes and more detail on the changes, but first Nate is going to give an update on the status of the work completed so far this year.
Good morning, Chair Martin and trustees. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. So at this point in time, I would just like to go over what we've done, what we're doing, and what we haven't started yet, just so that we can inform you and you can make an informed decision with regards to our amendments. Next slide, please. So at its current state, the audit plan has 35 projects on it. Here you see the 3 that we have completed since our last audit committee meeting. 2 of them are in assurance engagements, and the one there at the bottom is our own internal audit strategic goal. Next slide, please. Here we have our 13 continuous and current audit engagements. These engagements are perpetual. They are continuously ongoing throughout the year. I would like to highlight a couple of them. If you look down towards the middle of the listing there, you will see the oversight of the financial audit as well as the oversight of the SOC audit. We have completed the 24 audits for both engagements, and we will be bringing them to your committee to share the results. Next slide, please. This shows our in-progress projects at this point. There are 8 of them total. As you see, they're performed in various divisions and they are in various stages of completion. Additionally, we're also performing engagements in our own division in relation to internal audits, goals, processes, procedures in an effort to improve and grow as a division as a whole. Next slide, please. So this graph is a visual representation of our progress on the current audit plan. If you look to the pie chart on the right, combining the completed projects along with the up-to-date perpetual projects, we are at a 49% completion rate as of November 15th. It is our intention to complete by the end of the fiscal year to complete the 8 remaining in-progress projects, as well as start, and of course, it's all our intent to always finish those remaining 10 so that we do have 100% completion. But in all honesty, I don't think we've ever had 100% completion.
We're shooting for it.
Yeah.
We always
Always.
believe we can do it.
Yeah, we do have a minimum metric of 80%, which I doubt we'll have any problem getting to the 80%, but if we get fully staffed as planned, there's a good chance that we could hit the 100% mark this year. So I'm looking forward to that possibility for the first time in my 16-year career.
Good question. If the 49%, does that include the 3 projects that's happened since November?
Yes.
Oh,
So there's 3. So we recently completed 3. Prior to this meeting, at the September meeting, we brought 1 project to you. So that's a total of 4 completed projects at this time. And the 13 that are perpetual and ongoing, they are current and up to date as planned. So putting those 2 together, roughly 50%. Again, the 10 projects remaining is 28%. So at this point, we've engaged 72% of our audit plan already. If we were to just finish what we've started, we'd be at a 72%. So in the last 6 months of the fiscal year, engaging those final 10, we should have no problem reaching our 80% mark.
Can you elaborate on your staffing? You said something about having a full staff.
Richard, do you
Oh,
want to handle that?
we do have an item on the agenda for staffing, but I can talk about it now and we can just take it out of order.
Thank you.
We are in the process of making offers to 2 candidates for the senior internal audit position. So we had 3 vacancies, 2 senior internal auditors and 1 internal audit position. I'm very happy to announce that we are in the process of making offers to 2 great candidates and look forward to them coming on board, hopefully, in the next couple of months. And then we will be initiating the search for the internal audit position, the internal auditor position. Hope to have that filled by the end of the fiscal year.
Good. Thank you.
Next slide, please, Tina. This slide shows where in the division we've spent our time. There are 4 key segments, or that's how we break it out with regards to where we spend our time. 4 key segments in LACERA, including our own administrative projects. The darker blue areas show the areas that we have completed. And the lighter teal areas are those engagements and projects that we have not completed at this point in time. With that being said, I'm going to hand this back over to Richard, and he's going to talk about our requested amendments.
So we have 5 changes to the plan. The first is vendor security assessment. Due to risks that we've recently identified with SaaS solutions vendors, SaaS solutions being software as a service solutions, that we've identified the need to do some additional testing of testing of additional vendors for doing security assessments on them. So we're going to be selecting, I think we intend to do 2 additional reviews of SaaS systems in the next year, over the next 6 months. The RFP for financial auditor, the current contract with Plant Moran, it's hard to believe. It just seems like the other day it was extended. It was extended for 3 years with an optional 2-year, 2 one-year extensions. But the committee was clear at that time that those were on a contingency basis, that they really wanted to go out to RFP, that you wanted to go out to RFP at the conclusion of the work. So that contract actually expires at the end of the current fiscal year that we're in, June 30th, 2025. And we'll be coming back to the committee at the March, April meeting to officially get the committee's approval on moving forward with the RFP. As far as deletions go, the Human Resources Operations Review, we're currently performing an advisory review in HR, looking at kind of a follow-up to the prior recruitment review that we did. And this is an advisory audit, not an attest audit, but it covers a lot of the operations as well. So we just didn't want to duplicate the effort. And we also have to consider capacity at the division level, how many audits they can withstand in a year. So it made sense to delete that one. The TBD, that one that was aligned with strategic goal number 1, just given the 2 additions that we made and our limited resources, we thought that this could be postponed. A lot of great work's being done on that strategic goal. The management and staff that are working on that made presentations at the management offsite, and that is something that we'll consider for inclusion on future audit plans. The financial controls review is actually something that's being deleted, but it's not really being deleted because we intend to include that in the services when we go out to RFP for financial auditor. That will be included there. So it's really an even swap. So although it shows 3 deletions and 2 additions, it's really a pretty even addition and deletion. So I think there was one more slide after this, which just shows the effect that these changes would have on our status, and it's negligible. And that's, I think, the end of the presentation. Happy to address any questions you may have.
Trustees, any questions?
Just, Richard, sorry, you know, please help with the timing again on our existing contractual obligation with our external audit contract. That RFP that's in the process. Help me out with the time. It's 3 years, but it can be extended annually.
It could be extended for 2 additional 1-year terms.
2 additional, yeah, but yeah,
Right.
annually twice. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so and we are at the very end of that, correct?
We're at the end of the 3-year contract.
Gotcha.
As of June 30th, we'll be at the end of the 3-year contract.
The auditors still have one financial audit to perform, and that will commence in the new year for the fiscal year ending 2025. So once that audit is completed, the contract will be finalized.
So-
And that the audit will be completed. They'll start it in fiscal year 2025, but they won't end it until mid-October of 2025.
So we're gonna get our money's worth out of them, but it's still enough room in it that we're gonna allow that RFP process to happen, right? That's so.
We'll come to the committee in March for your decision on that.
First order, and then the other thing, was there, if I'm remembering correctly, just for a point of information, is there, we had that discussion regarding, there's institutional knowledge with a contractor versus new blood, and are we limited by if we do end up rolling the same group into it again? Isn't there something policy, a LACERA policy as far as, I know the RFP has to happen, but we can hire the same group over and over again.
They would be eligible for rehire. That's at the committee's discretion. Yes.
Okay, great. And then of course we'll have the staff's recommendation on that, on what they feel.
Exactly.
for that
Yes.
RFP. Okay,
If I may add, Mr. Green, we
Yes,
have
please.
had Plant Moran it'll be 10 years straight after their last audit. So it was, I believe, the committee's desire to get a new set of eyes.
Actually 9 years, I believe.
Oh.
9 years at the end of.
Oh, pardon me.
But the
9 years.
committee did express a
Yeah.
desire to not exceed 10 years. So that, whereas
I
the
remember
committee
that
could,
discussion, right?
could include, but they did express that desire at the last meeting. So
And
Yeah.
they definitely have institutional knowledge. I would say the last couple of the years, the audit has been really smooth just because we really know each other's process and MO. Bringing in a new auditor, particularly for this type of engagement, there's definitely a learning curve the first year or two. It does take more effort on each party, but that's just the nature of the work. So there will be a little bit more of a workload just because everything is new, their processes are new. They don't necessarily understand the uniqueness of what we do, but we bring in new auditors all the time.
Yeah, I'll say it's good. It's good to get new blood people to look at it, but also too, there's something to say about institutional knowledge and you know, the entertainment of the RFP process, I think keeps everybody on their toes, right? Thanks.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the amendments for the audit plan 2025?
I'll move it.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll do roll call.
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Raza,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg, Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Me,
Aye.
Chair Martin.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, so we're going to move to non-consent items 6B, Acres Committee and annual report to the board.
So this is the annual report, on this item, I've attached my cover memo to the annual report to the ACRE committee, from the ACRE committee to the boards. I'm asking that the committee provide input on the memo, including any suggested changes, additions, deletions, and then approve it and direct staff to issue the report to the boards from the committee at the board's respective January 2025 meetings. And this is an annual, the memo to the boards highlights activities of the committee. And this year was a busy and momentous year, with most notably with the committee recommending and the boards approving that the audit committee change and become the Audit Compliance Risk and Ethics Committee, the ACRE committee. The memo goes into detail on the specific work completed under the internal audit sections of the ACRE charter, the audits completed on the audit plan this year. This is the calendar year we're talking about. Oversight of professional service providers, and this year was Moss Adams and NetForce. Also talks about the oversight of the committee over the financial reporting process and the work completed by Plant Moran. And Plant Moran will be presenting the results of their audit to the committee later in this meeting. Further, it covers the committee's oversights of internal audit in the areas of values and ethics, and also organizational governance. The attached calendar or matrix to the memo covers all of the ACRE committee's responsibilities and what was done during the year. Each of these tied to specific areas of the ACRE charter as required, as related to the oversight of internal audit. And for the purpose of reporting to the boards, the ethics and compliance team will be separately coordinating their communications from the committee to the boards in the future. But so this really just covers the internal audit section of the ACRE charter. So again, I'm asking for the committee trustees take a look at that communication to the boards. Let me know if you're okay with it or if you have any suggested changes or questions.
I have something I want to raise on the LA County Rehired Retirees Program compliance. From what I understand, there's some level of risk and non-compliance with federal regulations or our tax exempt status with the IRS, and is associated with the county's, I don't want to say it in a negative tone, but not completely in compliance or having something that allows them to monitor and stay within the, what is it, the limited duration aspect of rehiring retirees?
Trustee
So
Moore.
there's two
This is-
different things.
Yeah,
Have that,
sorry.
yeah.
yeah, that's,
Explain all that to me.
we're on 6B right now, and what you're talking about is 6D. So we have D as in dog, right? Am I right?
Right.
Okay.
That's true. We are going to have a presentation
on
on that
that.
item.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, then I'll,
So you don't mind holding?
I'll
Okay.
address that
Okay,
in a moment.
all right, thank you. Any other questions regarding ACRE? So do I have a motion we need a motion to direct the staff to issue the reports to BOR and BOI, right?
That's right.
Okay, motion?
so moved.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore made the motion, Ms. Greensburg second, and I'll take a roll call. Mr. Moore,
Aye.
Ms. Durazo,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Ms. Me.
Aye.
Chair Martin.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, we're going on to 6C, request for proposal for auditing services pool, RFP.
Okay, good morning, Chair Martin and trustees. I'm going to provide just a brief overview of the RFP and highlight some of the key points. So we're going to start out with some background information. First slide, please. The purpose of this RFP is to select firms for inclusion in our existing audit pool. So we currently have a pool of 7 firms. They were approved by the committee in 2021 for our agreement terms of 5 years with an optional 2-year extension. So they can participate in the pool up to 2028. They've been a great resource for us. They have provided or conducted audits in some key areas such as organizational governance, IT, and HR. However, we have found that they lack some expertise that we need in some areas. In addition, with the evolving organization, we have our new strategic initiatives and goals as well. We feel that this is probably a good time to expand our pool so that internal audit will have sufficient resources when needed in the future. We are proposing that for the new firms that are added into the pool, that we have a 3-year agreement with them with an optional 2-year extension. So these contracts will begin in 2025, take us out to 2028. We also feel that at that 2028 time period, that's a good time to probably issue a new RFP, refresh our audit pool, because that's when not only the new contracts with the new firms, but also the existing firms will end. That's 2028. Next slide. We have 3 areas for our proposed minimum qualifications. They are in the areas of the qualifications and experience of the firms in conducting the types of audits that we would need, as well as providing advisory, assurance, consulting types of engagements, as well as their staffing capabilities. So all 3 of these areas, we will have a 5-year minimum. Next slide. As far as the scope of services, there are 4 areas. They include investments, IT, and organizational operations. Now, this 4th category, internal audit services, that's something new that we've added to this RFP for our pool. We would like to have some firms in the pool that internal audit division can use to assist us in improving our own internal operations as well as staff competencies. We will also like them to assist us with implementing the new IIA standards as well as internal audit best practices. Next slide. We will perform our due diligence by having an evaluation team that will use the criteria listed here to score each of the bids. It includes firm background, the staffing experience, the methodology, which is their approach in conducting the audit engagements that we would need, their adherence to our RFP instructions, and their proposed fees. So it's pretty standard as far as the criteria used organization-wide when it comes to RFPs. Next slide. And lastly, we're anticipating that this is going to be a 5-month process. We would issue the RFP in January 2025, receive the bids in February. Most importantly is that we would bring our proposed firms to the committee for their approval in about March. And then in April, we would establish the contracts. So we'll have these new firms in place for our new fiscal year audit plan, which will be fiscal year 25-26. Can't believe we're almost there, but so we'll have our resources that we would need for any of the projects included in our audit plan. And this concludes my overview. If there are any questions, we're more than happy to address them.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Madam Chair, if I may, on the memo, 42 out of 554, the check boxes there, those are the ones in the investment pool that have been identified. The X marks means that they are meeting the bar for those 3 criteria that we're looking at, and so they have not. So as an example, the Bailey Group, the LLP there, they have met the bar for organizational, but not investments in IT, or they haven't been evaluated yet?
Well, okay, I think you're looking at the chart that's in the memo that has the
Yes.
existing pool and then it has the areas
Yes.
of the expertise. So when we went out to bid, we allowed the firms to bid if they wanted to be included for audits relating to all 3 areas, they could, or if
Gotcha.
it's one area. So we do have some firms in our existing pool that they are experts for IT. So there's a check mark next to that firm where they can perform audits relating to that area and so forth for all of the other firms.
Understand. So like Crow, for example, they've expressed that they can do all 3.
Yes, yes.
And so that begs the question is, in this RFP process, if you get somebody, it looks like everybody's really strong in the organizational area. Would there be a second contract with somebody potentially for the other 2 areas, for example? Say you went with Bailey for organizational, but then, Crow for investments in IT, would there be a potential two contracts?
So we allow the firms to submit proposals. If they want to be included in the pool to perform audits in all areas, they can, or they can choose just to provide to bid to be included to do audits in a specific area. So for these firms where there's a check mark within in that category, it means that that is what they had bid when we did that initial RFP.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. But we are looking for somebody that fits all 3 of those markers.
Not
right?
necessarily.
Okay.
We have the pool. So each of these, if you go down the vertical columns, we're going to be adding a vertical column, internal audit services, and we'll have some check marks under that one as well. And then depending on the service that we're going out for, whether it's investments, IT, or organizational, we fish in the pond that has the X's down that vertical column. So
Gotcha.
that's who we select firms from. If we're going to IT right now, it would be Crow, KPMG, Moss Adams, NetForce, and Weaver that we would send our bid requests out to for a specific project. So we just want to make sure we have a big enough pond in all of those categories, including now the 4th category of
Gotcha.
internal audit services.
So that's following our existing format. We don't have a audit that's one and done for all those areas right now, especially since we're restructuring it, correct?
Yeah, we wouldn't go out and have somebody do, I mean, I guess it's possible, but we generally are hiring in a specific discipline.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting. And then you talked about the 2-year extension, same program, up to 2 years, 1 year at a time, right? Same contract?
It's an optional 2 years, and that is with committee's approval that we will only extend that additional 2 years.
That's as a contingency, though. It as Alicia said, with the current contracts will be coming back to the committee to extend those, to get approval to extend those. And if we extend those, then the 3-year contract that we do for the additional ones and the existing firms will all expire at the end of June 30th, 2028. And just to simplify this, then we'll go out to RFP. We will not request extensions on these additional ones because it would just make sense to do one RFP at that point for all the firms to get alignment on our search.
Yeah. And just to be clear too, even though a firm is part of our audit pool, it doesn't guarantee that they will actually have an audit engagement assigned to them. So when we have an audit that comes up, we go to our pool, we ask them to provide us with their proposal on conducting that specific audit engagement, and then we make the selection. So the beauty of having the pool is that we've already done our due diligence, we already know the experience, and so we have a specific pool we can go to, and quickly they can be up and running on an audit that we would need.
Who they've worked with before, and like, are they familiar with funds like LACERA? I mean, they might be in some of, but that'll all be in that March report, right?
Right. Well, we'd evaluate them on the specific project as part of the evaluation process when we actually hire them for a specific project. Is, what have they done with other pension funds or experience they have here?
So just to clarify, so it's a pool
It's a pool.
where we can pick from.
Yes.
And when we decide we need somebody to help us with internal audits, we send out whatever is work order.
A request for proposals.
Proposal,
bids-
and then they
bids, or
bid
request
it.
for bids on the.
And then
on
who
the
looks at the bids?
Internal audit
And then
staff
makes a
will
recommendation to
look at the bids.
committee. Okay,
Yes and no. Under the revised charter, if it's within the discretionary budget of the CEO, we would, or if it's under the 25,000, which is my discretion,
right.
if it's a small project, we could hire them directly. If it went from 25, above 25 to 150, we'd go through Santos. If it exceeds that, we'd come to the committee for approval.
Good clarification. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any more questions? Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay, so we're gonna expand our pool from 6 to 10. Is that right, the total?
You
We
know,
currently have 7. And so depending on the firms that submit proposals to us and their qualification, we'll go through the process of evaluating their proposals. And if we identify those who meet all of our needs and they score within, they're the top candidates, those are the ones we will bring back to the committee for approval. But we don't have a set amount at this
So you
point.
don't have a number that you want to have in the pool. It could be 9, it could be 11, it
It
could
could
be
be.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
so-
there may be some limit to what would be a reasonable
Yeah,
number, but yeah, maybe it's 10, maybe it's
Yeah.
12 total. I don't know. That might be at the outside.
Okay, so the additional scope of work you're talking about adding is internal audit
Audit
support.
services. Mhm.
Okay, are the existing people in the pool gonna be able to say through some process, we can also provide those services?
They can also submit a proposal specifically for that category
Okay.
and be part of our evaluation process and have that added in as an area that they can conduct services or audits in as well.
Okay, now, in 28, when we go out for creating another pool,
We would do a complete refresh.
okay? Now, are any one of the 7 that are in the pool now, were they in a prior pool?
Mhm.
And so where I'm going with this is, the 10 years of being on our external auditing staff or pool or under contract with us and making sure that we're refreshing,
Mhm.
not just, shuffling the chairs on the deck, but
Mhm.
we're actually periodically adding new people when other people fall out. So we're constantly, in fact, refreshing the pool, not just going through the process and bringing the same people back.
2021 was the first year that we started the pool.
Okay.
And so I think
So
we've
we
worked
just
with
want to
some of the
be,
firms before. but-
I just want to be cognizant of
Mhm.
that. We don't want to, in our pool, have somebody in the pool for 20 years.
No.
I'm not
No.
sure. I'm thinking about that. I'm not sure if that's true or not, because it's not an ongoing relationship like it is with the other, with the external auditor. It's an ongoing, continuous relationship. Here, it's individual assignments. Would we want to completely remove a KPMG from our pool as a resource to hire? I don't think necessarily, but that's my thought. I don't know if that limit applies because it's not a continuous, it's a number of smaller projects that have been assigned.
Okay, well, I didn't want to leave that discussion off the table so that
Sure.
we did not know what we were consciously doing
Yeah.
when we create these pools. And the other thing is, the last thing is diversity. I mean, that's, it's one of the criteria, one of the many criteria. And so within our current pool, what does it actually look like in terms of women and minority-owned firms? Like, I'm familiar with Vasquez. I know who they are. But out of the other, and as we go forward, is that going to be intentional at some level that we want to have a diverse group of people that can do everything, that are well qualified? So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind.
Yes, that is definitely part of our evaluation process. And even when we're searching out for firms to include in our pool, we found that it's not enough just to put our RFP on the website and expect to get a lot of proposals. So we do our research. We look to see what firms are out there. We're looking at internally, like the diversity as well as their experience. We also are part of some associations and our peer groups. We belong to Association of Public Pension Fund Auditors. We share information. There are several funds out there that also have pools. We ask them for recommendations or information on the pools they're using, as well as, the firms involved. And so it's all part of, the way that we're trying to get a wide range of firms included in our pool and make sure that they're aware of our RFP so that they can provide proposals to us too.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Trustee Me?
Thank you. So Trustee Wayne was talking about kind of on the tangent of what I want to talk about as well. I see the minimum qualification. I was thinking about the criteria, selection criteria, what the detail there, maybe you can see later. Like I just thought about it, right? Like would that diversity would that be one factor in that criteria selection? So keep that in mind. I concur with what he said. So one thing I want to ask is that for this kind of request proposal, of course, every time we go out there to request proposal, want the variety of selection of the brightest, the best talents come to us, submit the proposal to us, right? So, but that's pending on two part. One part is that how well we advertise this proposal out there to reach to the talents. The other part is the minimum qualification, how we set it, right? So that would control how many and how well the response is to this request proposal. So my question is, in the past, how's the response like, for this kind of request proposal? Do we have enough and good talents to respond to our request?
In the past, we have received a good amount of proposals. We would have liked more. And like I said, we did do a lot of research in trying to reach out and send notifications as far as our RFP. So I think that we've met that challenge pretty much.
I mean, I think, we also look at within the firms that we're looking at those factors, diversity within the firm. And I don't know off the top of my head whether any of these are specifically minority or women-owned firms, but we certainly are outreaching to attempt to get more firms, as many firms as possible to apply. So to your point, that's the part of not just putting it but doing research and seeking firms to ensure that we have a diverse group of firms to select from.
Right, advertise to the right, the good channel to reach to our audience. And
right? Some of the organizations that Lisa talked about. Yep.
Right, we can tap into our network to help out, to reach out to as many as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
I have a question. Do you work with, the county has such a big network when they do their RFPs. Do you connect into that highway at all?
That's a good point. That might be a resource that we can explore as well. I don't know that we've done that to this point.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure, but that is a good resource as well that we can
Something to think
include.
about.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right. Do I have a motion to move that staff release the RFP? Second? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Ginsburg made the motion. Ms. Gray, second. Take roll call. Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Other way around, yeah.
Let me clarify that. Ms. Gray made the motion. Ms. Ginsburg, second. Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Ms. Durazo, no, she here just stepped away. Ms. Ginsburg? Mr. Green?
Aye.
Ms. Me?
Aye.
Chair Martin?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
So we're going to move on to LA County's compliance with requirements for retirees.
Okay.
And that was the question.
That was the question Mr. Moore had, and not to steal Mr. Tafoya's thunder here, but to answer your question, Mr. Moore, yeah, there's two elements to the retired retiree program. There's the duration in terms of, well, the limited hours that they could work on in a given year, which is the 960-hour limit, and the required break in service. And in that regard, we've really seen that the county, they were in pretty good compliance prior to COVID. COVID threw things off for a few years, and they've come back into compliance, and this report will reflect that. In that regard, we're meeting the 960 hours. And kudos to the county. They've worked with us. The county has developed a new policy, which they worked with LACERA's legal office in developing this new policy. And LACERA's, what else? The issue is the duration, which is the number of years that people come back and work. And LACERA addressed that issue in 2023 with the revised policy for high retirees that the board approved, which requires that after 2 years, management has to bring candidates to the board for approval and prove that there's, and make a case for extenuating circumstances to go beyond the 2 years. And that's been effective in addressing that limited duration issue. The county is yet to do that, and we're going to continue, the executive office and legal office, to work with the county to address that. Other than that, also on the hours, not only has the county developed new policies and procedures around the 960 hours, but LACERA internally has developed controls, and our benefits division, executive office and the benefits division send out notifications to the members when they start approaching that 960 hours each year. So a lot being done there. Still need to address the duration issue with the county. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, what I got out of that was that there have been recommendations from LACERA to the county to address that issue. And as the county has been modifying and upgrading and, you know, getting more control over the whole environment over the last few years, that is just one issue that they have not addressed.
That's right.
So is there any reason why they're not addressing that issue? Because it doesn't seem like it's that difficult to make a decision to propose something and put it on the table for them to look at, either proposed from our side or proposals coming internally from the county. So what is the reason it seems that they just haven't seen that as something important or significant enough to address now? And then in response to that, would it be valuable for us to look around outside of California to look at some other pension funds that may have something in place that address that same issue, that we could offer them as guidance, or, you know, in other words, prime the pump so we can take that, what appears to be a risk, but a minimal one, just take it off the table by taking those kind of actions, finding out where there are other organizations around the country.
We have looked at CalPERS's policies.
Well, I'm
and,
not
you know,
talking about
procedures, but,
California.
other states we haven't.
Yeah.
We could do that too. Mr. Rice has come up. I'd like to hear his comments.
Yes, Chair Martin, trustees. The question that I heard you ask Trustee Moore related to LACERA's tax qualified status and whether it was in jeopardy as a result of the county's non-compliance.
Yeah, let me just qualify that. It appears to me that that is a risk, but it also appears to be not a high significant risk. It appears, just from all the language and discussion, that it's not a major risk.
I think that's right. It's not a major risk, but LACERA is responsible for ensuring that we're not paying benefits to individuals who are not entitled to receive them. And PEPRA provides that retirees may not return to county employment without reinstatement. And when they reinstate, they would no longer receive their pension benefit for the period of reinstatement unless they comply with the statute. The data that Internal Audit has collected shows that there are 100 county employees across 15 different departments who have worked 10 years or more in retirement. And it's hard to conceive of a definition of limited duration that would be consistent with that. Now, the county has 100,000 employees. It's a very complicated organization. They have a lot of unique needs, including some difficulties in certain departments in staffing. staffing for emergencies, special needs, a variety of circumstances. But nevertheless, even at the average annual pension payment, that's several $1 million in pension benefits that we're paying where there's a question. And I'm not sounding an alarm here, but I just think we should realize that this is a significant issue, and the county was very eager for our input on how to deal with the 960 hours, on how to deal with their policy overall, putting in place a process for regular review of returning retirees to make sure that there's some process for that. But we did ask them to address the limited duration issue. We provide them with a copy of our policy that showed how we had addressed it, which is, as Mr. Bendel described it, with 2 years of executive office discretion. And then after that, it has to go to the board of retirement for approval. A system like that might not be effective for the county, but the problem that we have is that the county has done nothing in the area of limited duration. And so this is an issue that we need to continue to work with the county on, because it does create our plan document, there is a risk that the IRS could say that there's not compliance with our plan document in this respect. I agree that the risk is minor, but when we're talking about millions of dollars of benefits that potentially may be paid in violation of PEPRA across such a large number of county departments, it's an issue that we need to continue to put focus on.
Right. And I think another way you can characterize what I'm saying is maybe we should be more proactive in putting things in front of them to address the issue that may work in their environment. So, for example, the county has 85 departments that have to get their budget approved. But the 15 department that has people who have been there more than 2 years know who they are. And they know that they're budgeting for those positions in their coming budget. Would it be difficult if during their budget process, they identify that and put in the proper request for approval? So it just becomes somewhat of a perfunctory type ministerial activity to get those approved. It flows through the Board of Supervisors, and there's a process in place where we have it covered. In other words, within their administrative processes, there has to be a way they can come up with something that will address that and take that off the table for us. Because it's not going to look good if, I don't know, some IRS auditor came around 8 years from now and they've seen it for the last 10 years. We've been saying, oh, you guys need to do this. Oh, you guys need to do this over and over and over again. So let's just put something on the table that they have to address.
We do intend to continue our communication with the county. That communication actually is ongoing. I've discussed the limited duration issue with county council as to why they haven't addressed the issue. There hasn't actually been an explanation provided. They just haven't addressed it. So we'll continue to work them, and the ideas that you're suggesting are in a vein we really haven't approached them on. So appreciate the comments, and we'll continue our discussions.
And if this is an IRS regulation or requirement, that means everybody in the country is subject to it, which means there are other pension funds that have just as many employees in their organization as the county. In some way, they're addressing it.
Well, let me clarify that. The rules on returning retirees that we're talking about are in PEPRA, so that's California state law. It's something that California retirement systems need to comply with. The IRS gets involved because our tax qualified status is dependent upon compliance with our plan document. Our plan document is SERL and PEPRA.
Okay.
And there are, however, something we haven't done, which you're bringing attention to, is are there returning retiree statutes in other states And how do they address that to ensure that those systems are in compliance with their plan document? And so I think we'll broaden our review of returning retiree statutes nationwide. I'm not aware of other states that have one, but there may be.
There's a national organization of pension fund accounting systems, personnel, that maybe that's a source that you could find out something from. So that's enough of that.
Okay,
You got it.
Trustee Gray.
Well, I think Mr. Rice has answered my question. But my question to all of us, I've been on the board a long time. This issue has come up before and we had extensive discussion about it. So is the hiccup at this point in time the county's inability or dragging their feet on taking care of the issue of rehired retirees? Because I remember we talked about, well, we could have like I think there was going to be like a ticker or something where LACERA, which I think you mentioned, Mr. Bendel, would notify the retiree. But I also recall that we were going to notify the department and the department head. So there's two hits.
I think
on
we
that
do.
nail.
We do that too. We notify the department as well.
That's on the 960-hour
On the
requirement.
hours, not on the duration.
There
That's on the
are
hours.
two requirements. There's only 960 hours per year, plus the work has to be of limited duration. Those are two different requirements of the statute. The 960 hours is very clearly defined. It's a number, it's a maximum, it's clearly defined in the statute. Unfortunately, the Pepper statute doesn't define limited duration. So it leaves it open for systems to put in place a process to ensure that there is a definition of limited duration and that it's enforced. And so LACERA has tackled that problem for our organization. The county hasn't yet tackled that issue for their organizations. What do they view limited duration to mean, and what's the process going to be by which they ensure that people aren't working beyond limited duration, that they're transferring work to permanent employees, which is the intent of the statute, and that retirees don't double dip.
So when I read this, I thought there was a little chart that said there was only like one employee who had over 5 hours.
That's
over.
the 960 violation.
Okay.
That's the issue of that. And that's not an issue anymore. We've really got good controls around that.
So that's not an issue. 960 is not an issue for LACERA employees. We're talking about county employees, our members, correct?
The 960 is only a small issue. It used to be a very big issue.
Right.
And internal audit has been reporting on this for a long time, but the county has really got their hands around the 960-hour requirement. They have a good system in place, and the information that's in the report, if that was compared to prior years, would show dramatic change. In fact, there's a chart in the report showing the change from 2021 to 2024. They've gone from 177 employees where there was a compliance issue in 2021 to only 5 that's the average overage in 2024. So that's significant progress. And the number of non-compliant retired retirees last year was only 1.
Okay.
So they've really done a great job with that, and I think we were helpful in that process with the work that internal audit did. So let's keep nudging them on limited duration.
So when you say limited duration, are you talking about a retiree's ability to do 960, take a
To
break?
come back year after year after year after year,
That's what I was
with the number of them over 10 years, still coming back as a rehired retiree.
I have seen that.
Yeah, that's what we're
I
saying.
have seen that.
So I think we've stolen all of Mr. Tafoya's thunder, but I do want
sorry.
to thank him for his work on this audit this year. I don't know if you still
We have a
would
couple
wish-
more
questions. Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
I'm
it's okay.
jumping the
From,
gun. I
Trustee
apologize.
Me and then Trustee Green.
Right. I'm still kind of new, so I'd like to understand the risk, is it high, is it low on this issue? So I see as a high risk, if I understand it correctly, is that for many business out there, every business out there, paying tax is a big deal. It sometimes could make a business, right? And then I learned that fortunately, LACERA, for the earning that we make every year, we don't have to pay tax. So assume that's the IRS tax exempt statute. And in my opinion, that's very critical. There's a lot of money. For example, if the past fiscal year, right, our fund increased by $5.3 billion. So if we don't have the status, meaning if we have that much earning, we have to pay tax on that amount of money. That's huge. And that tax, if we have to pay it, that hurting everyone, hurting employer that contributed money to this, hurting employee who also have the employee contribution, hurting our retiree for our pension fund, how sustainable, how well we're protecting our money. So that's my understanding how high risk this is. We cannot risk to jeopardize this, statute. But maybe help me if I'm misunderstood it this way.
Yeah, I'm not sure the implications of what losing the tax qualification status would be. I know that the tax deductibility of the contributions to the fund, I think, is one of the things. I'm not sure that it would, if the tax qualification status, and I don't know if you know that, Mr. Rice, whether it affects the actual the fund having to be taxed on its earnings. I don't believe that, but I'm not sure. I just don't know.
Losing that status.
Yeah, it's not a good thing to lose that status.
Right. If you lose, does it mean that we have
right.
to pay
It would take a
tax?
number of different things. It would take a preponderance of issues to, I think, lose that status. This would just be one factor that could contribute to that. I don't think necessarily, as Mr. Rice indicated, that this issue alone, but it is something that, we need to address. It's important because cumulatively, it could be risky, to your point, very risky.
Trustee Green?
Lost it. A couple of quick questions. The memo talks 417, 100%. That's all county employees in the entirety that are doing this rehire. Is that correct?
That's the number right now, 417. Yeah, we've seen more in the more distant past. There was, I think the trend is, what's the trend going up a little bit now, Gabe? But it's up, yes. It's down. I think we've been doing this for 10 to 15 years. We've been doing this monitoring, and I think it was in the 500s at one point.
Did you guys compartmentalize that? Because I know we're getting into PEPRA, here as we get closer to the, vetting, 5 years vetting. I mean, we started to go, but out of that 417, how many are PEPRA? Are they mostly legacy? I don't see it defined.
So the rules apply, the PEPRA rules in this case apply to everybody. So we don't know necessarily of that 417 which are actually covered by PEPRA or not.
That would be
of the retirees. I would imagine that at this point still very, because these are retired members,
right?
That not a lot of them would be PEPRA members.
Yeah, 5 years was 2019 would be 2019 would be the first year, 5 years vesting with PEPRA if they were hired later and they qualify age-wise. I mean, albeit the number's probably extremely low, but that would be something I would request if it's possible to compartmentalize, because as we see, not only it'll produce data trending forward into the future as we transition out of legacy plans into 100% post-PEPRA plans for succession, in the future. I would say I would like to see that information if possible, if it's attainable. And then you made a note, and I caught it. You said something about the numbers, COVID, and so we see that trending number down on the chart. Fiscal year 21, 22, 23, and then ultimately 24. So that's a byproduct of the pandemic, I'm sure, right? Is that what you're alluding to?
So during the pandemic, there was an allowance for exceeding, there was an exception. The governor issued a amendment to the law that allowed them to exceed the 960 and have people work basically full time, but they were supposed to code the time cards as a COVID exception. And I think there was confusion. A lot of them were coded correctly, the COVID employees that were high retirees during the COVID years. But I think there was confusion, and some departments thought of some of their retired retirees as COVID employees, but didn't code them correctly. And that's why we saw such egregious overages where people worked basically the full year. They worked 1,800 hours, not 960, and they weren't coded correctly. And I think that's why we had some really egregious overages during COVID.
So that's where I'm going with that. That's great. So, and then but the oversight by the sponsor and LACERA, we're talking about this, it's producing the cleanup of that. It's like, using FMLA, right? When implemented, it was all over the place, no reason codes or whatnot, but as it gets cleaned up and used and the muscle gets, so that's an attribution to the oversight. So a real risk, if I'm understanding, I just want, looking for clarification on this, really is it, if I'm off base, please tell me, the exposure out of the PPG 505, the language, because it doesn't have, because it sounds like the program's getting implemented, but this really comes down to a PPG revision to ensure that it has that language to capture it. Is that really, am I gathering that from this?
The language that addresses the number of years that
Limited
retirees,
duration.
the limited duration.
It's just
that-
absent right now, but if that was there, it would take our potential risk to our tax status, right?
Right, that would address it. And that's what we're looking for them to do
An easy one.
in a way that works for them.
It's the county.
Give me the Word document. I can paste, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's, and so I guess that's the real question. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff here, but if the plan sponsor understands the liability, potential liability, and like Mr. Rice said, not to saber rattle or anything like that, but that's kind of a big deal if, you could be the one guy doing 80 miles an hour on the freeway and the cop, and you're like, everybody's doing 80, and the cop goes, well, I pulled you over.
The diversity of the departments and the issues, you've got children's services workers where they don't have enough staffing, and to not have, so there's real issues that need to be dealt with. Sheriffs, where they don't have enough sheriffs and they need to bring people back as a 960 to work as sheriffs to have coverage. Those are the kind of challenges these departments have. So it's a balancing act, and there needs to be a process, at least for, like we have, for approving it for the extenuating circumstances, because there certainly are extenuating circumstances, like the examples I gave, which require that we, would be prudent. And I think at the state level, if anybody was to look at it, they'd say that is prudent, but we have to make sure that we document that prudence.
Right. Okay. So but the sheriffs are excluded from that. They can roll over.
No, they're not excluded. No, they're part of the duration, the ones that are exceeding the duration. And I know that they've got hiring challenges right now too, like most government agencies do.
But Pepper doesn't bind us to it, so to speak. But we have to address it, right? Is that, or do we have
this issue is important really for two reasons. It's important to LACERA because we want to maintain our tax qualified status. We spend a lot of time in this organization throughout our divisions, making sure that we comply with the letter of Searle and Pepra. That's really our job in a way, is to make sure that we're paying benefits pursuant to the law. But the most important benefit actually, the most important concern is not the impact on LACERA, but the impact on these members, because they're receiving their pension benefits. If they're working out of compliance with Pepra, their risk is they're going to lose their pension.
Yeah. Through forfeiture language.
Yeah, I mean, the statute doesn't provide that, but because the statute is light on remedies, it just says you can't work without reinstatement, doesn't impose an actual remedy. But what the law means is we can't pay the pensions to members, retirees who are out of compliance with the statute. So if LACERA put in place an enforcement mechanism, the Board of Retirement did not want to do that in 2023. They wanted to give the county a chance to develop their policy, and at some point, we're going to have to go back to the Board of Retirement with an enforcement policy, because that's actually a gap in our processes right now, is we don't have an enforcement policy outside of LACERA employees. So we're going to have to address that, at which point the penalty is not going to fall on the county, the penalty is going to fall on the members.
Yeah, and that's a contradiction to our duties on this horseshoe. So is there something that this board can do to recommend to the BOR as far as compelling maybe the CEO to and legal to, get the, obviously, everybody working towards the same goal is a lot better. I mean, we're over here on an island enforcing policy, but the counties, for whatever reason, is not changing the nomenclature, which would be an easy fix in my, marble slotted on that one for me.
Trustee Green, I have a proposed motion that might handle all that. I think we could instruct the staff to forward this report to both BOI and BOR. And then we can also instruct LACERA to continue their efforts in working with the county on the limited duration and report back to us maybe in 6 months. I don't know, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that's a good chair. Translate what's going on in my brain. Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody want to move that motion or no?
Point of order, Chair Martin.
Yes.
The BOI really isn't involved in this week. The report could be
Only-
forwarded for their information, but it's really not within their
Okay,
area of
then
concern. It's the
BOR.
Board of Retirement.
Perfect.
If I may ask something like Mr. Rice brought it up, do we need to work on our internal LACERA reinforcement as well? He just mentioned that we don't have a reinforcement on our side. That's one thing. And the other thing is, I'm thinking, isn't it also our responsibility to make sure we communicate this critical information to any retiree? Make sure the message get across. The moment they retire, maybe on the retirement exit into anything, that education is done properly, communication
is-
done properly.
Sorry to interrupt you. That is part of our process now, the internal LACERA process is to notify all first-time rehired retirees, and annually when they come back, they get a letter from LACERA notifying them of their, that's to the 960 hours. That's not to the duration issue.
Yeah, we haven't
Sorry.
defined duration, so it's hard
Yeah,
to
it's not defined, so,
educate the
yeah.
retirees.
Yeah, that's right. Without having it defined, and there's nothing to educate them on until we determine what that criteria is.
Then we need to do our part and then help them, educate them and communicate with them, have them take ownership of their own benefits, right? Themselves to be compliant, because they don't want to risk their own benefits. They don't
But
want to risk.
trustee me, we don't have a duration, so we can't even educate them. Like, we need the county to say the duration is 3 years without, unless you have an exception. We don't have that, so we can't even share it. So what are we going to tell the retirees, I guess?
So they come from county, they come from LACERA. The duration.
Well, the
definition.
duration, the county has to work with LACERA, if I'm correct, to come up with the duration, the limited duration, and how they're going to monitor that at the county's level, correct?
Madam Chair, to Ms. Mead's point, I understand what she's saying is that once that happens,
Yes,
a system should be in place to be very clear
correct.
with our retirees that
Correct.
but one has to come before the other.
And one of the remedies the departments will have is that they can rehire the person, and that's a remedy if they have a staffing need, that they can rehire them as a full-time employee. The
Correct.
person stops receiving their pension.
Okay, so can we move to a motion then?
Okay, so it's to
Yeah.
send
The
it to the
motion.
boards and to
Just BOR.
I'm sorry, BOR, and then bring it back for new status available in 3 to 6 months.
So it's to accept and file the report as well as forward it to the boards,
To
the rest
BOR.
of it, right, to the board.
But the whole report, or bring their attention to this specific item in the report?
We'll do both.
Okay.
And that has to be in the report.
Right.
It's in the report.
No,
Yeah,
I mean-
it's in.
I'm just saying, if you just send the report to them, they won't know that what we want them to do is to go to this particular item.
We'll direct them to that.
That's-
Direct that attention.
Right. Direct them to that.
That
particular
in
item.
the memo to the board.
And
Okay.
since I'm on that board, I can
Me too.
stir that pot up too.
Now,
Did
is
you-
this going to be an FYI thing, or are we going to send it to the BOR as a non-consent?
I think it's a report. Not an action item, because there's nothing for them to take action on right now. We would inform them of this. I'm not sure we would even do it as an FYI. I think we might do it as a presentation item, but it would be a report at this point.
Okay.
It's even better, a presentation item. That way you can explain to them why you want them to see this report and have some interchange.
Looking
So do
forward
we
to
need it reread or we're all clear?
On the motion,
Yeah,
maybe reread the
Yeah.
motion, yes.
It's to accept and file, send to the BOR. Is it as an FYI?
No,
It's a
As a
presentation?
report.
Okay, I'm sorry.
presentation.
It's a presentation and continue the efforts to bring back 3 to 6 months.
Trustee Martin, Chair Martin, when you originally listed your proposal, you included the important element of continuing the efforts to work with the county.
with the county, that's what she's missing out. It continue the efforts to work with the county and report back in 6 months.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll take roll
Thank
call. Ms. Greensburg made the motion, Ms. Gray second, Mr. Moore,
Aye.
Ms. Gray, Ms. Durazo,
Aye.
Ms. Ginsburg,
Yes.
Mr. Green, Ms. Me,
Aye.
Ms. Martin.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you for all those efforts. Appreciate it. Okay, we're running down to 6E. So Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer, LACERA proposed classification and compensation. Carly's going to come up and brief us on that.
Good morning.
Morning.
So today we have before you the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer proposed classification and compensation. So there are 2 recommendations. One is to approve the classification and compensation, as the other one is to recommend this action to the JOCC and then to the joint boards. Okay, so I'll start with a little bit of an overview about the general process. I'm not sure if all of the trustees have been through the creation of a new classification. So generally, the process is that the department, in this case, the legal office, as the head of initiative strategic priority 4, objective 4.1, to establish an enterprise risk and compliance program. The legal office has taken the lead on this effort, and they are serving as quote unquote the department. So normally a department would request a set of duties to be performed. We would evaluate whether these duties exist in an existing classification or if we need to create a new classification. In this case, our ethics and compliance program is new. And so we needed to create a new classification. Normally, a new classification would go to the JOCC, Joint Organizational Governance Committee, to be established and have the classification and the salary reviewed, then be directed to both the Board of Retirement and Board of Investments for approval. In this case, since the ACRE Committee has authority for the and isn't that crazy? It just went right out of my head. The Ethics and Compliance Program, it is coming here for your review. So a little bit about the background. You have a copy of the approved charter, which this body has already approved. And this is important because standing up this program requires a head, right? So this is the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer. This is a part of the Institute for Internal Auditors 3 lines model. And so we're bringing a complete office in the near future to be established, with the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer position being the first position to be established. In creating a new classification, the department would usually benchmark their needs. Sometimes they review external class specs to see if they can borrow or glean from there. In this case, Ms. Barrett and Mr. Rice worked closely with Rebecca Walker on surveying the landscape of what an ethics and compliance program is and what the responsibilities of a chief ethics and compliance officer might be. So a lot of the duties that are described in the attached class description have been made to go in line directly with the program and the program charter. Let's see, I think I have skipped one page. The currently LACERA has some ethics and some compliance duties performed throughout the organization. And this is more than just a consolidation of these efforts. The Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer will really serve as LACERA's subject matter expert in the implementation and execution of an innovative program. A little bit during the benchmarking, we found that there's no quite direct match for what our program is and the way that it will impact the organization and where we want the CECO to be situated in the organization. So it is a little bit unique in that sense. The classification, the proposed classification specification is attached for your review. I'm happy to answer questions about that. Having established what we have proposed for the duties, what we have proposed as the minimum entrance requirements and the minimum training and experience requirements, we then begin the process of benchmarking a salary. Usually what you want to do for benchmarking a salary is compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. I've already stated a little bit that we have not found a great match. The provided memo talks a little bit about comparing to other 37 acts, other public sector agencies and other private sector agencies, and we still didn't find a position that has the correct placement within the organization, the scope of responsibility, and the general purpose of our program. And therefore, to benchmark our salary relied mainly on internal equity. So one thing in general with salary benchmarkings, HR considers the market placement. So just all, let's say, ethics and compliance jobs, either in a region or in a specific sector. We consider internal equity, and then we consider internal differentials between supervisory and subordinate positions. Therefore, our recommendation is to allocate this position at LS12. That is the current allocation for other division managers, but very specifically, it's the current allocation of the Chief Internal Audit position. So since these are two of the three lines of the model, we figured situating them at the same salary allocation was appropriate. Another concern that we had about salary is salary often informs applicants as to the level of a position. So we wanted to make sure that the salary was commensurate with the placement and the responsibilities of the CISO position within the organization. So the memo also highlights a couple of market things that we've provided, so you can see what the market data is for salary and internal alignment for salary. So the implemented budget would be around just under $330,000 per year, and that's fully costed. So the cost of salary and the cost of benefits.
Top step, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, since I got the Carly, real quick. The salary schedule LS, is that a LACERA salary schedule, or is that's our own salary schedule?
So you probably heard the LS before. So there's LS, LR. The actual chart is exclusive to LACERA. So LS is used mainly for MAP tier 2. LR is used mainly for MAP tier 1. So other county positions use an LS title, but it's a different chart. Our chart is exclusive to us.
Okay. Trustee Gray?
Okay. You said earlier that the compliance officer's salary schedule would be LS12, which is ours. And earlier you said that compliance officer would be head of a department that we are creating at this point in time for compliance.
Yes.
So the salary would be commensurate to, or no, it would match those of other department heads here?
Yes,
At LACERA?
yes.
That's a big ask in terms of recruitment, isn't it? I mean, is it difficult? It seems difficult.
Well, we're unsure. We anticipate that it is a competitive salary. So based on the other information in the market, it's not too high, it's not too low. So it's appropriately around the 75th is where we try to be. More importantly, it matches with our chief internal audit, who will have similar responsibility.
That
I'm
was
sorry,
gonna
the
be my
CISO will
next-
have similar responsibility as chief internal audit.
That was gonna be my next question. So the compliance department that we're putting together, and I recall we talked about this before, they would report to Mr. Rice, is that correct?
That is correct. So right now we're calling it a quote unquote unit because well, right now it has no staff allocated to it. Our proposal is that it will contain one chief ethics and compliance officer. We'll have 2 supervisors, a set of analysts, and then a set of support staff.
Now, with respect to the hiring of this chief compliance officer, will the JOGC interview this person or interview the finalists that you have, or how are we doing that? Or is it just internal audit and Mr. Rice, or is it just Mr. Rice who decides who's going to be our chief compliance officer?
Right, so it is an administrative position, so it would be an internal hire. And I'm not sure that the JOGC participates in administrative interviewing.
No, the way the
It's the
a
CEO.
couple comments. First, on the reporting relationships, the relationship, and this is something that was worked out with this committee, with the JOGC, and with the board, because the charter went through, as you may remember, the whole gamut of our board structure. The functional reporting relationship is not to me. The functional reporting relationship is to this committee, to the CEO, and to the joint boards. And that was very important to the boards, that they have, this committee and the boards have that direct reporting. Because there needs to be an administrative line of reporting, that's the only line to me, is it's administrative. Functional line is to this committee, to the boards, to the CEO, and those functional reporting bodies will be the ones who make the final hiring decision, evaluate, and so forth. So we will discuss with this committee once we have the classification approved through our internal LACERA process and then by the Board of Supervisors, what the approach to recruiting would be. But I would expect, and I believe the charter, this is consistent with the program, with what the approved program charter states, we would talk to this committee and to the boards about having trustee involvement in the hiring process.
Trustee Moore?
Yeah, first of all, Dr. Natoya and Mr. Rice, I think, did a great job, very comprehensive job in coming up with creating this position and the requirements and qualifications that are in alignment with the new charter. And in a sense, I believe that we're probably trailblazing in this whole area of the redefinition of an audit committee and what their duties and responsibilities are supposed to be. So in a sense, we might be setting the predicate for everybody else in the country and showing them what to do. So I think we did a great job. I say we, but Mr. Rice and Dr. Natoya did a great job in setting that framework for us to work from. The only real question, I have 2 things. One is kind of an issue and the other one is a question. And one is, given the whole plenary authority issue that we've been grappling with for the last 5 years, the plan is to give this to the county and they include it in the ordinance. There's no review, opining, anything other than here's the new position we want you to add, and we want you to handle the administrative and ministerial activities to get it included in the ordinance. Is that the plan?
That's the plan, subject to the outcome of the litigation. So that's the process that we believe is the right process, and that's the policy that the Court of Appeal described in the opinion in our favor. But the Supreme Court will make the final decision.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we were following that track. Okay, and yeah, and then so then the other thing is the 3 positions in the org chart. There was an org chart that had some staff positions. Those I think it's just the analyst and something, right? Just some generic titles. Yeah,
yes.
okay, generic titles. Because I'm assuming that eventually those will be specific and there'll be additional new positions included in the ordinance.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And as those positions are created, they'll be added to, for example, the scope of responsibility that the CISO has. So right now we're already working on like a second in line position. And so as soon as that comes up, the CISO will have direct supervision over this next person.
Okay. And then just because Ms. Gray raised it, the recruitment is then going to be the responsibility of the CEO. Is that right?
Yes, but I think the process that Mr. Rice described was that there would be input from the ACRE, yes. Mhm.
But
Yes,
the person
yes.
who's responsible for the hiring authority is going to be the CEO. Is that right?
The CEO will be the appointing authority.
Appointing authority. Okay. And then when we do the interviews, then if the board wants to participate in that, we can talk to the CEO about how to structure that kind of process.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Trustee Moore, if I may, and Mr. Rice alluded to this. So when we went through the process of reporting responsibility for the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer, one of the things we stated is the appointing authority will be the CEO, but as Mr. Rice stated, the ACRE committee will have a role, the legal office will have a role in terms of the supervision and the not authority, but the work of that CISO. As part of the interview process, we want to engage this committee because there'll be reporting responsibilities similar to those of our chief audit executive, that the chief ethics compliance officer will have a responsibility to this committee as outlined in the charter. But ultimately, the appointing authority is the CEO. It is a management position. We have it housed in the legal office. As that office matures, ultimately, the goal is to have that as a standalone office reporting to the CEO. But this could be 3 to 5 years from now, but ultimately that is the goal. But administratively, to get that office up and running, it makes sense to have that reporting structure within the legal department.
So with regard to the interview committee, that's an issue between the CEO and the committee and the board.
Correct. It'll be a collaborative discussion with HR, legal, the CEO, and this committee in terms of how that interview structure will flow.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Okay. So do I have a motion to approve the establishment of the classification and salary range for the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer and refer the classification and salary to the Joint Organization Governments Committee and review and recommendation to the Board of Retirement and the Board of Investments?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
I'll take roll call. Motion made by Mr. Moore,
Aye.
second by Ms. Gray. Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore.
Can I vote now?
Yes.
Aye.
Mr. Raza, I did. Mr. Raza. Aye. Ms. Ginsburg.
Yes.
Mr. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Me.
Aye.
Ms. Martin.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we're moving on to reports. I have a recommendation to pull 2 reports. I don't know if Richard's coming up. Does anybody have any recommendations? I want to update on F and G. Anybody else have any recommendations?
Yeah, but I do, but
Okay,
I just don't know which report it is in now.
well, that's okay. He can start with the F and G and then maybe you figure it out.
Okay.
Okay.
That's why I'm just lost as to where. Right. Mr. Moat, did you have something you wanted to pull? Is that what I heard?
I gotta find it.
He's
Oh,
finding
okay.
I
it,
can
yeah.
tell you the subject. I don't know what report it is. I think it's in B, but
Yes, definitely. We're going to go in order. I guess that they're just articulating what they would like to pull at this point. But we do have the Plant Moran,
Okay.
the financial auditors coming up to do their presentation. We're going to be taking the reports in order, right?
Okay, yes, yes.
You were just expressing which ones you'd like to.
Yes,
The
correct.
informational items that
Correct.
you'd like to pull.
Yeah.
Good morning, Chair Martin and trustees. Every year at the December meeting, we bring to you the results of the financial audit and the compilation of our financial statements. If you take a look at your package, you see it's quite a hefty effort, the resulting product. The audit itself takes a real yeoman's effort, particularly with regards to the FASD department. I like to thank the division as a whole for their service and their dedication throughout the years. The process has become easier through the years, and a brunt of the work is laid on the FASD department. So I'd like to thank them for what they've done. Additionally, there are key stakeholders that contribute tremendously in investments, benefits, systems, retiree healthcare, QA, and the legal division. So this was Plant Moran's 9th year, I believe, performing the audit.
8th, I
8th
think.
year?
yeah.
Okay.
Same ballpark.
So, like I said, I'm sure you read all 200 pages,
Mhm.
but just in case you have not, we have Amanda Kronk, Senior Manager, and Kristen Hunt, the partner on the engagement, and they are here to provide some insights and answer any questions that you may have. Ladies, please, the floor is yours.
Right. Thank you very much. We really appreciate to have some time on your agenda to go over the results of the 2024 audits with you. If we can turn to the next slide, I'll just give you a preview of the items that we'd like to talk about today. First of all, we'll have to talk about the audit timeline and deliverables and give you a sense of the periods that we do our audit work and when we perform those. We also want to talk to you about the areas of focus that we have for our audit, and then most importantly, the results of the audit. So overall, we have very good audit results to be able to present to you today. We do very much appreciate all of the cooperation that we get throughout the process to be able to be here with you today to provide the reports. The reports are dated in mid-October, so to be able to get through all of the work that we have to do to be able to have those requires a lot of attention from your team, a lot of information and attentiveness to our requests. There's a lot of information that we have to ask questions about, a lot of samples that we pull, and to be able to have that unfettered access to be able to have the team make it to have a priority and answer our questions so that we're able to get through our work to be able to provide our opinion is very much appreciated. They were very well prepared, on time, and had everything ready for us to go and in accordance with the timeline that we had laid out. So if we could turn to the next slide. This talks about our timeline. So as you well know, the year end for the financial statements are June 30th, but we get started on our work before that. In the spring, we get working on our initial planning procedures and our discussions that we would have with the management team to be able to determine if there are any new current events or anything that would impact our audit that we want to make sure we're prepared for, so that there aren't any surprises on either end as we're performing our work. Then as we get towards the end of the summer months, we're really starting some preliminary interim test work. A lot of that relates to a review of the processes and the internal controls that we need to be able to understand in order to then lay out our plan to be able to execute the audit. And so then really a lot of those detailed procedures are really being performed mostly in the months as we get into August and September, and really just putting the finishing touches on those in September as we are dating that report in the mid of October. And we issue 3 reports for you. The first one is the most significant. So that's your audited financial statement opinion. That's the large document with the audited financial statement report. But you also have to get 2 other additional reports related to the reporting for your employers. So the GASB 68 report, that's the pension report that your employers need so that they can record the disclosures in their financial statements related to those. Remember, you have a cost sharing multiple employer plan related to those. And then the GASB 75 report, that really relates to the OPEB. So that's the pension benefits for those. And that is an agent plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda to talk to you about the areas of focus that we have for our audit and give you a little bit of insight on some of the more of the deep dive on some of the testing that we would perform related to those most significant areas.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. So I thought I would start off covering the information on this slide by talking a little bit more high level. So the auditing standards do require us to do a thorough risk assessment every single year. So as Kristen showed you on the previous slide, that timeline really does start in the spring. So we're constantly risk assessing through all of our discussions, assessing how that impacts our risk and the risk to LACERA's financial statements. Now, some of these risks are new each year, depending on the transactions that did transpire during the year, and some will recur every single year, just given the nature of LACERA. So I thought it might be helpful to just talk through some of the most significant risk areas and how our audit approach addresses those risks. The first, and these are perhaps in no particular order, but the most significant perhaps would be the investment valuation. So investments make up a significant portion of LACERA's financial statements, and that does therefore indicate risk. So as you know, the portfolio is made up of a number of different investments. Some are easier to value and some are harder to value. And due to that stratification of risk, we develop our audit procedures to address that. Again, we focus on existence and valuation in particular, and have developed a number of ways that we test through LACERA's internal controls to ensure that those valuations and that those investments really do exist. So I mentioned we do test through the internal control structure. We do control test the various controls that are in place at LACERA. And then we also, again, based on a number of risk factors, will select samples for substantive testing. Census data, and we indicate here particularly at the county level, just due to its significance as a contributing employer of LACERA. Again, the assertions that create the biggest risk are accuracy and completeness. And we utilize AI technologies and high-powered sort technologies to do a comparison of the census data year over year. And we do that looking for anomalies or members or demographic information that isn't acting like we thought it would. So if someone's date of birth changed or someone was granted more than 1 year of service in any given year, those anomalies, if you will, are where we focus our substantive testing, right? In things that aren't acting like we expected them to. We think that really provides you 100% test of that population. So that's really where our testing begins. And then again, we're selecting samples to ensure accuracy from the total population. The next bullet there is really focused on the actuarial valuations that you receive from your engaged actuary. We do review those assumptions because they do play a significant role in estimating the total pension liability and total OPEB liability. So we make sure that those assumptions are reasonable as compared to other systems and other market studies that have been done. So again, we're not actuaries, but we are reviewing those just to make sure that they're reasonable given how LACERA is structured and other market comparables. Accuracy of benefit payment calculations. So all payments to members. Again, we utilize a similar comparison that I described for census, again, looking for anomalies. Did someone receive more than 12 payments in a year? That would, potentially be indicative of an issue. Significant changes in their monthly benefit. So again, could be indicative of an issue. So we then, again, are looking for anomalies as it relates to that set of payments. And then we are testing from there. We also select a sample of new annuitants during the year to ensure that their payment is calculated appropriately. And then last but not least on this slide, financial reporting. It seems like it might be the top of the list, but that's kind of the end result. So, certainly testing the numbers in the financial statements and then reviewing the entire financial statement to ensure that it complies with the GASB standards. Lastly, on the next slide, really the part that you've engaged an auditor for, the audit opinion. So we are pleased to say that you have received an unmodified opinion, which means your financial statements are free from material misstatement. And this is the highest level of assurance that you can achieve on a set of financial statements. One thing to point out here, and this is not new, but I do still like to just point it out. The opinion letter does include what's considered an emphasis of matter. This is not negative. It's just indicating to the reader that there is a significant estimate within the financial statements related to the valuation of those harder to value investments. So LACERA is obtaining a number of pieces of information from those fund managers just to ensure that the information that they're obtaining quarterly or monthly is accurate, and that they're using that information to value those investments as of June 30th. The last slide here in our prepared material is covering other required elements in our communication to you at the end of the audit. A few things that I thought I would point out. One area is estimates, as I mentioned. So management does make a number of assumptions and estimates within the financial statements, both of which we've covered and how we test those. Those are really, again, related to the harder to value investments and then actuarial assumptions. We also encountered no difficulties or disagreements during our audit, and we had no corrected or uncorrected misstatements. One thing that I would also like to comment on you'll see is not included in our materials today, and Kristen alluded to it earlier in her presentation, was that we identified no significant deficiency or material weaknesses in internal control that needed to be reported to you today. So again, that goes back to how well, everything is being handled and administered, and that our audit this year did not uncover any deficiencies in that internal control structure. At this point, we'd be happy to take any questions if there are any.
I do have one question. With respect to your reporting, particularly, can you go back 3 slides, please? Right there. Particularly with the accuracy of benefit calculations and related payments. Do you just report to our internal auditor?
So as far as if we were to identify so of our sample, let's hypothetically say that we came across a calculation that we would deem, perhaps it's inaccurate or it was calculated incorrectly. We would vet that out through internally with management first. So we would work with internal audit and say, hey, there might be something wrong, something isn't quite right with this calculation. We would then likely end up with benefits and members, or member services and work through why maybe this calculation is incorrect. If it were found to be incorrect, that would certainly be part of our report back to you. Assuming that it would rise to a level of needing to be reported. I'm happy to say we did not have any of those instances in our sample this year. But again, we're not testing 100% of the population either. So we did not have anything in our sample this year that required reporting.
So there's nothing that would open us up to litigation with respect to benefit calculations that you found for this year?
Correct. We did not identify anything in our sample, but again, we can't possibly test 100% of your population of benefits paid during the year. So again, our testing for the financial statement audit did not uncover any issues that any issues.
And would member services report to you any anomalies?
That is not currently a practice. So that would be more of a management function and not necessarily a function of the financial statement audit.
The reason why I'm asking these questions is because, we want an accurate report.
Sure.
And sometimes it seems like just using a testing sample could just be, because we have so many retirees and so many members, that sample could give you a false negative, a false positive report. Isn't that correct?
It most certainly could, but again, part of our audit is ensuring that the internal control structure is designed in a manner and is operating effectively in hopes of deterring, or if those issues do arise, that there is a structure in place to correct and work through those issues. So in answer to your question, yes, the financial statement audit is not designed to identify, nor would any financial statement audit identify every single potential issue there is in an organization. But again, that's why your internal control processes and controls should be designed to address those items before you get to a financial statement audit.
In that particular area, in the accuracy of benefit payments, we have very strong controls in that we have the quality assurance division that does 100% review of benefit calculations. So, I think in the past, the external auditors, and I don't know if you guys ever found that, but maybe the prior external auditors, there were one-off situations where there were minor due to cost of living adjustments that hadn't been considered. And so it was very exceptional, when I mean limited, very limited number of findings that were ever found. And we corrected those for the affected members. It was nothing sort of endemic to the system of controls. And I think that's what Ms. Kronk is referring to, that there's a strong system of controls around it. They just do a test for further assurance related to the financial audit, but there, I don't know if that addresses your question.
It does.
If I may, I have a quick question, Mr. Granger, if I may. But the governing regulation dictates because right, one time's a fluke, 2 times a coincidence, 3 times a potential problem, right? So, but there's a governing body, is it GASB, that tells you what would be the standard cut to look at, and you guys are at or above that.
Right. So we have to follow generally accepted auditing standards, which would dictate that you have reasonable assurance. So it doesn't dictate where it's going to prescribe exactly the sample sizes that you would have to pick, but each of us firms, when we design our audit approaches, have to be able to design tests that we feel like we're going to be able to stand behind our opinion. And so generally what that means is that you would set sample sizes that you think would be initial ones that would give you that levels of assurance. And then what would be with benefit payments or any other sample that we would test. If you find errors, then that causes you to increase your audit level of skepticism and risks, increase sample sizes, and then you start testing more. Some of the things that Amanda was sharing with the more modern audit techniques helps us do even more effective audits, because instead of doing random samples of picking individuals to test, you're able to use these techniques and do some of the things like she was saying of you can compare benefit payments by person from the prior year to the current year. And then if any of those anomalies stick out that related to significant payments went significantly up or went significantly down, or they're more than 12 payments, those give you really good opportunities of areas to zero in on to do tests on those versus just randomly picking samples.
Right.
With populations as large as you are, like you're exactly right of it. You could just, pick a sample that happened to be okay and maybe that wasn't, but being able to use these better techniques really helps us sharpen that and be able to help us with our
Thank you for
overall
that. But to
approach.
Ms. Gray's point, I want to back her up on this. I understand, I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, what I'm saying is that metric, because the regulation says it has to be reasonable to provide accuracy.
Mhm.
So I guess the follow-up would be, it sounds like, there's a self-regulated metric to get that kind of data. Is there a plus or minus on it? Is there a when they say a fudge factor, like this,
Yeah.
that there could be some resolution loss. I think to Ms. Gray's point is that
Yeah.
what if the sampling's not adequate enough, and is there data to support that it's not, or it's just right, or?
Well, what we really have to do to be able to support our opinion, we have to say that it's materially correct, right? And so if we find errors, as I mentioned, like we would do more, we would select more. And if you keep finding, you have to keep testing enough until what it's called a tolerance level, where you have to say, we can stand by this balance, and that if there are errors, that those errors, you can do extrapolation techniques, things like that, project them to the rest of the balance. But at the end of the day, you have to be comfortable that if a balance isn't materially correct, that you can't have an unmodified opinion like Amanda mentioned. Probably what I think maybe makes most sense of what you're talking about, like kind of the measuring stick for that. So auditors get peer reviewed. So our audit approaches and get evaluated by other firms every 3 years to come in, and they do samples of selecting our audits, and they look at the way that we've treated those, look at the things like we've had for errors, and see what really making sure that they think that our judgment is correct. And if it isn't, then there can be commentary on your peer review, or we actually get a peer review report for ourselves that would say that we have a clean audit opinion or not. And so.
We have Mr. Granger stepping up here, I believe, has some comments.
Good morning, Chair Martin, trustees. I think all the comments are accurate that were made by Kristen and also Richard. And just to kind of summarize sort of globally, and I apologize if I'm reiterating some of the comments a little bit, but to your point, Ms. Gray, it does start internally with our benefits team calculating the benefits. They do go through an extensive training program. We obviously have legal compliance. We have to comply with SERL in terms of PEPRA in terms of calculating those benefits. We're establishing a compliance program internally at LACERA. It also is reflective of our quality assurance program, again, internal at LACERA, right? Making sure those 100,000, 75,000 benefit calculations are accurate before they go out the door. When it comes to the audit process, that comes sort of at the end, sort of after the fact. We've talked about sampling. We've talked about the professional standards, the AICPA standards, the government auditing standards, the ethical standards that Plant Moran has to follow. So they follow all of those standards. Those standards are also reviewed by another firm that audits how Plant Moran does their process. So it's not a once and done with Plant Moran. They won't necessarily identify every single anomaly and every single benefit calculation as they've explained, but it really, again, starts internally and then it goes through the audit process. That's sort of that double check. And by the way, Plant Moran does an excellent job of asking questions. And if there's any anomalies, believe me, we hear about it immediately. We have our benefits team is supporting, our quality assurance team is also supporting. They're part of the conversations that we have with Plant Moran. Anything comes up, Amanda's talking to us about, hey, what's going on with this? Hey, is this correct? Is this not correct? Let's look at the member file. They do look at our database directly as well. So they have direct access to all of our data. And at the end of the day, this is sort of how the audit process is essentially governed. Hope that helps.
You put it in a very good perspective so that I could see how the wheels are turning as opposed to just getting the report and sitting there going, oh, okay. But
Right.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful.
Sure. You're welcome.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
it's H that I wanted to take.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I need a break.
All right.
Yeah, we all kind of need this right.
You have a question, Larry? Yeah, of course.
Thank you. This is good work here. A couple of questions. You had mentioned that there were not any significant findings, otherwise they'd be stated in the report. And sometimes you come across items that are not deemed to be significant and they might be found in management letter per se. So was there a management letter issued in association with this audit that you performed?
Great question. We have issued a management letter in the past that included control related items for consideration. We did not have any other recommendations this year, so we did not issue a management letter.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So, and then also you mentioned that you evaluate some of the internal control structures, but it's clear in the report here and SAS 115 that you don't express an opinion though on the internal controls. So can you explain to the committee so that we understand kind of the extent of work that you do around the internal controls and why is it that you're not expressing an opinion on that?
Sure. So there's a few different things at play here, and one of which is actually a new auditing standard that was issued and that LACERA had to be, and we had to be in compliance with this year, and that's related directly to internal controls. So you're correct. And while we do not issue an opinion directly on your internal controls, that is part of your financial statement audit, is looking at the processes and controls. And as Ted mentioned this very well, there's a whole process here at LACERA that occurs before we even start our auditing. And just to go in and select a sample with no internal controls in place would not make for a very effective audit. So certainly understanding those processes and controls assists with our risk assessment. And if we see gaps in those controls, that certainly could pose a risk to the financial statements of that organization. So we do spend extensive time and have worked with management to understand those processes and controls, and then we do test them to make sure they're operating effectively. But as you mentioned, the auditing standards do not require in your case that you get an opinion on those internal controls. That really is more focused on like a federal awards audit.
Thank you. I just want to point out to the committee that earlier we approved a change in the internal audit plan, which appeared to eliminate a review on internal financial controls, right? Review over financial reporting controls. And it looks like it was actually just moved to the RFP process where Plant Moran or whoever is selected in the new process would initiate such a review with regards to financial reporting over internal controls as part of their onboarding process or a separate audit per se?
It's similar to the like what do we call that with the SOC audit? We had the
The readiness
the readiness assessment. It probably would not be part of the regular financial audit. I see it being more of an agreed upon procedures type additional project that we would have for the financial auditor. If that answers your question.
Yeah, good. So that'll provide the committee some additional assurance around those financial controls that you're not expressing an opinion on.
Right. I think that's a good point, because if you think so, as Amanda mentioned, so the goal of any financial statement audit, even if you're a public company, doesn't provide an opinion on the internal controls, but there are separate things that you can do to address the internal controls. Public companies would get separate reports based on Sarbanes-Oxley, those types of work.
Yeah.
So be keeping that same kind of mindset and eye on internal controls and valuing those as important is a good part of your role.
Okay. And then finally, are there any emerging financial risk or issues that the committee needs to be aware of going forward?
Great question. So the world is ever changing. So there will be some new standards, GASB specific accounting standards that LACERA will need to evaluate. The soonest one, which is effective for LACERA's fiscal year that you're in now, will be related to compensated absences and how that number is being calculated. I know the FASD team is hard at work identifying what the impact of that new standard is. So we'll definitely report back on that. There are some proposed financial reporting model changes. There's more to come on that. That is a few years out yet. But the compensated absence is the closest new standard. So we are working with management to make sure that that's adopted appropriately if necessary.
Ready to move on? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'd just like to acknowledge, everybody talked about the great communication, that's the effort that's required and during the audit process. And Nate talked about people doing I'll use his word, a yeoman's job. Well, Nate is the chief yeoman. He's the yeoman's yeoman on making sure he's the liaison between the external audit firm and all the divisions. And I'd like to thank Nate for all his great work on the audit this year too, as well as Pam Moran. Thank you.
Yes,
thank you.
Pam Moran, they're just great. They're great to work with. They communicate clearly, and we have a really good working relationship. There's honesty and transparency with both parties.
Great.
I just want to say, I love this. I love having the other people look at our stuff. I mean, this report, it's long, but it validates, the investment staff, benefits, the audit staff, all are operating in somewhat of a deficit in all areas, and they're hitting the mark. And I love that process to have you all come in, and of course the coordination matters, but it reaffirms it, and for the membership and the people's retirement benefits, I tell them they're in good hands. They really are, and it's just validation, and sometimes that's so important, to be validated. So, and just kudos to everybody working on all this stuff, and thanks for the work and helping us look good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take a break. No.
So we have the next two presentations are going to be with Stephen Rice and his team on Code of Ethics and Foundational Work Plan status.
Debbie, want to take a break or just do these last two?
Want to take a break?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're going to take a 5-minute break. 10 after. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
We have these three still, right?
Yes. Just be super short, just so you
All right, we're getting started with our presentation.
Recording in progress.
Thank you. Please sit down. Thank you. You ready?
Ready if
Let's
you are.
go.
Great. Good morning, Chair and Trustees. I'm Jess Rivas with our legal office, and I'm excited to be here today to let you know about our updates to the Code of Ethical Conduct. We're just beginning our work, so we want to let you know what our plans are and get your input as well. Next slide. So by way of background, before we really dig in, wanted to be sure to put everything in context. There's been lots of other recent developments in the organization, chief among them formally establishing our ethics and compliance program with the program's charter, as well as this committee's charter, and that just happened back in October. Also last year, we of course updated our strategic plan, our vision, and our values. So it's good timing to update our code of ethical conduct as well. Next slide. Again, oh, back one. There we go. So what even is a code of ethical conduct? It's a key document that establishes standards of conduct and internal controls to reduce ethics, compliance, and risk. It's a key part of our ethics and compliance program. It's meant to promote an organizational culture that encourages ethical conduct and a commitment to compliance with the law. And the DOJ guidelines explain that having a code is the first thing they look at to determine whether an organization has a commitment to compliance with the law. Next slide. So here's our current code. Hopefully you've checked it out at some point. It was last updated in November of 2021. So we're right on target for a 3-year update cycle. Currently it's very text heavy. It's pretty much only text at this point. So it's and at different points throughout uses dense legalistic language. It's not currently organized around themes or larger issues and is simply a list of topics. So these are some of the things we'd like to address. Next slide. So here's our goals for our new code. Our top priority, of course, is to set expectations and norms in alignment with our mission, vision, and values, and serve as an ethical decision-making guide for the entire organization. But beyond that, we want it to inspire people to not just meet standards, but exceed them. We're hoping to cultivate a sense of service to our members and our beneficiaries. And lastly, we also want to do a couple of additional things. We want to make sure it's comprehensive. We'll be covering several additional topics, which we'll touch on in a moment. We want to improve clarity and organization. Again, kind of move away from that just wall of text that can be overwhelming and impede comprehension and retention. And lastly, we want to make sure it's accessible through multiple channels, which again, we'll be talking about in just a moment. Next slide. But here's how we're going to accomplish all of that. When it comes to content, we'll be adding additional topics to make sure the code is comprehensive. We'll be using clearer, more concise language, less dense language throughout to just help with understanding. In terms of format, we've reorganized, or we're proposing to reorganize our table of contents around our values. We'll be getting to that in a moment. We're excited to share that with you. We'll be sprinkling throughout new helpful features, call-out boxes, Q&As, et cetera. Again, to just highlight key things and help folks understand and retain important information. And we want to make it accessible through multiple channels. So we're hoping it's not just a static PDF that sits on your desktop or you print it out and it sits on your shelf. It's something that you come across more often in your day-to-day. So we're exploring having a condensed version, like a quick start guide or something that's more easily accessible, or potentially also a website that folks can click on or that they may come across on our homepage and easily access and be able to interact with. In terms of training, we will be sure to train trustees and staff every 2 years, and it will be part of our orientation for new trustees and staff. Next slide. So here's our table of contents, our proposed table of contents organized around our values. We'll come back to this slide in a moment, but just to give you a moment to reflect on it. Again, it's organized around our values, and we were very pleasantly surprised and very pleased that our values align so nicely with all of these ethical standards and requirements. And I think it just is a credit to this body and both boards and all of staff's work in coming up with those values. Next slide. So just through the next several slides, I'll show you several examples of what other organizations not table of contents, what their codes look like. So this is Pfizer's, a sample from Pfizer. You'll notice at the top, they have a navigation bar. It just helps put yourself in context. You know where you are whenever you're no matter what page you are in the code. It has icons to highlight key information, has references and links to other key policies, because of course this document is not going to encompass all of LACERA's policies. It can direct you to other relevant policies that you may need to look into. And it avoids long blocks of text. That's the thing that jumps out most at me when I look at it. It's pleasing to look at. Your eye is drawn to different areas and you don't get overwhelmed by just a bunch of text, and you're encouraged to keep reading and to engage with the document. Next slide. Here's a sample from Excel Energy. You can see they have call-out boxes to highlight key information, Q&As to provide real-world examples. Next slide. Here's an example from CalSTRS. Do's and don'ts, again, just helping the reader put themselves in the shoes to consider different ethical dilemmas they may come across and really engage with the material. And also not shown here, CalSTRS has a decision chart or flow tree, or decision tree or flow chart, sorry, that helps folks just in a bit broad sense understand how they should approach ethical issues, what questions they should be asking themselves, where they should turn to for help. And we're hoping to incorporate something similar. If we could go back to slide 7, that essentially concludes my presentation. After this, we'll be presenting to both boards in January to make sure they're in the loop as well to get their feedback. We'll return to this committee in March 2025 with a near final draft for your review. We'll get your input and then take to both boards for their approval. But at this moment, I'd love to hear any feedback you have or any comments, thoughts on the current code, thoughts on our proposed draft table of contents, perhaps thoughts on the samples we've seen, things you really liked or maybe didn't like as much. Just would love to hear any feedback at this point that we can incorporate as we move forward.
I think your samples are amazing, that you've gone out there to see what others have done. And yeah, the more interactive you can make it, the better it'll be.
Right.
Definitely love it.
Great. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I really like what you've done. It's so funny. I'm sitting here with my LACERA water bottle and it says LACERA values and everything is right here. I go, hey, they hit almost everyone. Yeah. Okay.
Actually, we did manage to get each of them in there. We were,
okay.
It took a little bit of work, but we got them all in there.
However,
yes.
What I like is slide 8. If you could go to slide.
Pfizer, yes. That's
yes.
Yeah.
What's really good about this, it is interactive. Well, of course, the print where it says we speak up, keep open doors at first needs to be a little bit bigger. I'm thinking in terms of what actually makes this readable.
Yes.
And to the, not so legal person, if you see something and you want to say something, like one of our employees, if you see something, you want to say something, you've got references. And like I immediately looked at the picture, because you'd have to work with communications on this.
And we are.
Yeah. But this, well, I thought this was the best because, I don't want to read a lot. It's perfect. I think that you got samples like with CalPERS, the do's and don'ts, but I don't know, this is fine. We're above CalPERS. They have to just accept that. But this one looks good. It's good for a 6-year-old. And that's I think how we want to do it.
That's very helpful. And exactly, it's something that your eye is drawn to. You want to engage with it. You want to keep reading. It's not just a wall of text that's kind of discouraging to engage with.
Just do, it's telling you to do something, but then it talks about a little thing right here, retaliation. And it explains this is like done really well. So
thank you.
And then it has links at the bottom, which I think, if someone is going online, they can go to if they have, I don't know, maybe I'm weird, but I'll click on the link, read all of that. That's kind of my research mind, but you can do that. And I think I just think it's great for us.
That's great. Thank you for your feedback. That's helpful.
Chair Martin, if I may add a minor comment. I like everything I see too. Great jobs. I'm more like thinking ahead of this implementation phase. I'm thinking if it's just ethic and training in every 2 years, we have it in all the county department, right? How effective it is, I have questioned.
But it's every 2 years with respect to the ethics and code of conduct, not training trustees, you know, the general training you're talking about.
Okay, I was thinking.
Plus, we have offsite
Right.
every year.
Yeah, I'm just comparing over the department's practice, you know, they have ethic training, like I'm in for-year department, right? So how effective it is, sometimes after a while, people just like click through and that's it. So I'm thinking to how to strategize, make it more effective as organization. I'm thinking it's more like incorporate into organization culture. You know, so make everyone carry themselves in such a high standards, really no room for anyone to justify their own wrongdoing, right? So like it's easier to say than do, you know, but just a thought, you know, when we do the implementation, how do we as organization, you know, in like have this embedded everywhere in everyone's thinking, everyone's mind and value, and then we carry on in our daily operation.
Thank you for that. That's a great point. That's exactly the goal of our ethics and compliance program, is affecting the culture. So it's just something that everyone does reflexively. It's reflected in everything we do day in and day out. And so this will be a key foundational document to promoting that culture. So thank you so much.
One other quick question, I'll make it quick. When this is all done, does that go to our ethics and compliance unit when that's created? Or it's just part of our LACERA policy?
I think ultimately, and then turn to our chief counsel, but my understanding for at the moment, we're getting this going. We have to get this done now. But I think ultimately that would be part of under the purview of that officer.
Okay.
Yeah, this is really great, and I really like the fact that you're moving away from all of the legalese and in the prior one to something that's a little more readable. I too like the links to the policies, and that's really, I think that's a way to go, and then have a discussion there. So one of the things I'm looking at on here under the code administration, there's training, enforcement, and review. So I'm just wondering, you know, when you see something and want to say something, you know, is there making sure that there's like a clear escalation path if you want to report any issues, and, you know, and that is can be anonymous even if they want to, or you know, without fear of retaliation.
Correct.
Or anything like
Yes,
that,
those
right?
things exist, since we want to make sure it's reflected in our code. So it's, at the moment, we have it slated to go in under, we hold ourselves accountable. So we have our ethics hotline, reporting channels, what the investigative process is. Of course, no retaliation, which goes right along with that. So absolutely, that is definitely something we want to include and highlight and make sure it's very clear for folks to understand.
And so rolling this out will be really important, you know, with regards to training and awareness and promoting ethical values. But is there going to be like a certification process, you know, where staff read it and agree to abide by it, or is that just individual policy?
Correct. We will have folks, I'm blanking on the word that we use. I want to say authenticate, but I think it's a different word. Certify, acknowledge, attestation. There we go. That's the right one. Attest that they've received it and they received it, reviewed it, and they will follow it.
Agree to it. Okay. And then you mentioned multiple channels. And so this will be like on a web, is it electronic only or a handbook?
That is our goal. So at a minimum, we will start with that PDF document. That people can always turn to and use as a reference, and perhaps Control F if they're looking for a certain issue. But we're exploring what else we can do. So perhaps a shorter version that's easier that maybe you can print out and keep on your desktop or reference it elsewhere. A website that is built into LACERA.com or our internal website where staff and trustees can easily get to it. So we're exploring all those options. We want to make sure there's more than one way to get this to this.
Okay. And it would be part of an onboarding process, perhaps?
Yes. So training as part of orientation for staff and trustees. And
Mhm.
then after that, biannually or every 2 years.
Okay. And when does this come back to the committee for?
This will be back in March 2025 with hopefully a very near to final draft for your input at that point. And then we'll go to both boards for approval. That's the plan.
Great. I'm sure we look forward to it. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all your input and assistance. Thanks.
Good morning. Madam Chair, trustees, Mr. Jensen, and I cannot let this go without saying a special hello to Miss Gray. And this is your swan song. I'm very aware of it and I'm not going to get emo, but here we go. So as you all know, the ACRE Committee and Boards approved the Ethics and Compliance Foundational Work Plan at the September and October meetings. And the ACRE Charter specifically provides for staff to implement key ethics and compliance functions to prepare for the arrival of the CECO, and in that interim, continuously evaluate and prevent risk. In order for you, the ACRE Committee, to effectively perform its oversight duty, the charters require us to actually report to you regularly, so you know what we are doing. So today we present the first ever work plan status report. Next slide, please. The authority for LACERA's ethics and compliance program lies in our constitutionally mandated fiduciary duty and the ACRE and the ethics and compliance program charters, which were modeled after the United States sentencing guidelines and the Department of Justice evaluation of corporate compliance programs. Next slide, please. So when you are exercising your oversight duties, we ask you, the committee, to view ethics and compliance reporting through the lens of the big three questions that the DOJ uses when evaluating corporate compliance programs that are under investigation. Is the program well designed? Is the program sufficiently resourced? And my personal favorite, is the program actually working? The answers to these questions will become more fully realized as the program matures. As you all know, we are just getting started. Next slide, please. The education plan. In October, we established quarterly training for the Ethics and Compliance Committee, which is a committee made up of about 28 LACERA leaders. We meet monthly to review organization-wide policies and discuss other ethics and compliance issues. Our first training session was led by Ethics and Compliance Counsel, Rebecca Walker, and we discussed meaningful policy drafting and review. And I stress meaningful. We want our policies to be effective. They need to say something and be useful. At the November management offsite, we launched ethics and compliance with LACERA's leadership team of over 70. We discussed ethics and compliance impact on continuous process improvement, on employee engagement, and of course, organizational culture. And then in February of 2025, we will be coming to the ACRE Committee orientation to include key ethics and compliance topics such as roles, responsibilities, and processes. Next slide, please. There is a separate report in your materials on policy management, but I'll briefly summarize. In early 2024, an Ethics and Compliance Committee subcommittee began research for a policy management system. After a very extensive search, the team determined the most effective way to immediately manage risk was to build an in-house system in SharePoint. That resulted in Compass, LACERA's policy library, which becomes operational this month. That will be followed by all staff training in January 2025 and a full presentation to the ACRE Committee by our genius Compass developers in March. For a sneak peek, the policy management report in your materials contains screenshots of the contents and the organization of the Compass site. Next slide, please. Ethics and compliance risk assessments will be conducted alongside internal audits, annual risk assessment, with specific ethics and compliance risk-specific surveys and interviews, which will be tailored to each of the 16 divisions' individual risk profiles. Ethics and compliance and internal audit will meet next week to begin this planning process. This joint collaboration is specifically designed to provide aligned insurance across the three lines. Next slide, please. Legal, internal audit, and HR are working on an organizational culture plan, and that includes ethics and compliance, what ethics and compliance means for employee engagement, operational productivity, and meeting our fiduciary duty and mission. In early 2025, the culture team, we're not calling it the culture club, although we want to, the culture team will begin conducting LACERA-wide focus groups and written surveys. Next slide, please. Our class specifications. Thank you, Carly and HR, for preparing and presenting the CECO class specification. As mentioned, additional ethics and compliance office positions, such as the deputy, will be brought to the committee for consideration next year. And next slide, please. Our last item on the work plan is the update of the Code of Ethical Conduct, which was just brilliantly covered. Thank you, Jess. Next slide, please. So you will be getting one of these work plan updates at each meeting as required by the charters, and it will most likely be by me. You're stuck with me until we get a CECO. With that, we're happy to answer any questions regarding the work plan and any other ethics and compliance materials in your packets. Thank you. Well, thank you. I'll talk to our legal and see if we can get away with it.
We could have a, and then they could have a theme song.
Chameleon.
Seriously.
Good morning, Chair Martin and trustees. As some of you may recall, over the past few years, internal audit has presented to the audit committee an orientation at its February, the first meeting of the year. That orientation was a short orientation that went over the key roles and responsibilities for the audit committee that were defined in the audit committee charter. It also went over key elements of internal audits charter, so you are aware of our roles and responsibilities, as well as the audit committee consultant role and responsibilities. However, with the committee's expanded responsibility into risk, compliance, and ethics, we thought it would be helpful, and also members of the audit committee suggested it would be helpful to receive a more detailed orientation, just so the committee members are more aware of their roles and responsibilities. So the logistics of what we're proposing are a training session, a discussion on Wednesday, February 26th from 9 to 12. It would not be an ACRE committee meeting per se. We won't really have any items to vote on. But we're also open to whatever dates work well for the committee. And then the topics that we have are the ACRE and internal audits roles and responsibilities and processes, ACRE and ethics and compliance roles, responsibilities and processes, values and culture, like we've been discussing today. Values, organizational culture are important, enterprise risk management and risk assessments. We would be hearing from certain division managers on their risk assessments for their own individual divisions, information security and data security, reading to understand financial reports and actuarial reports. This would be presented by Plant Moran and CAVMAC, who CAVMAC is the audit actuary. And then we would also lastly hear from Larry for committee consultant comments. So those are our proposed topics. We wanted to see if the committee had any additional areas that you'd be interested in us covering.
I think it's pretty extensive. I'm excited about the training, and thank you. That was easy.
February 26th will be the last day of my 50s, so I can't think of a better way, a more exciting way to really celebrate that than internal audit or internal control training.
You don't look it at all.
So ENF are for information only, and you pulled item G. Alicia. F, G, and H, right, sorry. F, Alicia Collins is going to address F.
Okay, good morning once again. I'll just make a couple of comments regarding the status of these recommendations. The committee may recall that at the September meeting, we did bring you the audit report for our audit of the termination of user access. That report, or the audit, had 4 findings. Let me back that up. It had findings in 4 areas and 10 recommendations. They related to updating the policies and procedures, incomplete and missing records, and untimely deactivation of user access rights. Now, due to the critical nature of the findings and the recommendations, the committee did request that we come back at this meeting and provide you with an update. Due to the timing of meeting materials, we did provide an update in the meeting materials, but it is as of October 31st. However, this past week, we met with the key divisions responsible for implementing the recommendations in order to get a more current update on the progress made. What we found is that they have made good progress in implementing the recommendations. They sort of broke them out, the action plans, into 2 phases. The first phase is where they're pretty much updating the policies and the procedures and also developing the checklist. And you'll see in your materials, as of that October 31st period, the executive office board assistants had already updated procedures relating to the offboarding of trustees and also developed the checklist. In phase 1, they are still continuing to develop the remaining procedures for offboarding of employees and also our contractors. And then in phase 2, that's where they'll be working on more of the more complex action plans that are going to require a little bit more time. So for phase 2, it's probably going to be implementation of those recommendations towards the beginning of next year. So that completes a little update for you. And if there are any specific questions, we can address those at this point.
My question is, if we're okay with this, do you just file it now? Is that the next step or
So
what?
they're included in our RECO follow-up process where we continuously update and review and track all of our recommendations until completed.
Okay.
Excuse me. And then at each meeting, we do provide an update on all of our recommendations. And so with this one, since the majority of the recommendations were due as of December 31st, they're not all going to be completed by that date. They do have a plan to complete them, but it won't be as of December 31st. Part of our process is that whenever there are recommendations that cannot be implemented within that initial target date, we go through a process of looking at how far they're going to need to extend the due dates out. And they go through a process of approval through the executive office too. And then they have a plan to actually implement them. So that will be the case for these as well.
Okay, thank you.
And then similarly with the, if there's no questions on that one, just I know in the consideration of time, I'll move through this one quickly too. That we brought a audit memorandum to your committee at the September meeting, resulting from findings that we had, breakdown of compliance on testing of the bonuses, staff bonuses paid. And at that time, we had 2 recommendations. And the management had not had an opportunity to provide responses to those recommendations. So the committee requested that we bring this back to this meeting with their responses, and the official responses are addressed here. But we can also, I can say that management's taken this very seriously. They're addressing the policy. It's going through the very formal process of getting approved within the organization, but we believe that's going to be done. They've got a date of completion. I don't know if I recall it. Sorry, somebody said something. But those that's the issue of the policy is recommendation 1. That's going to be addressed by June 30th of 2025. And recommendation 2 is looking at all the bonuses that were paid for 2024 and retroactively making sure those were actually valid, and that has been done. They've approved all bonuses through the end of June 30th, 2024, and or the termination of those bonuses because people actually got promoted into the positions or the position ended, the circumstance ended, and they're looking at the ensuring that they are compliant with the current bonuses being paid for fiscal year 2025. We are also going to go back and these will be included, as similarly to what Leisha said, as part of our regular recommendation follow-up, and we will do a further cap test. But you know, I can tell you management is taking this very seriously and addressing them.
Now, H was the next one, right?
H, Mr. Moore, that was my report about the hiring that we're doing. Did you have any specific questions on that?
There was a specific question I just wanted some clarification on, because I didn't understand this one, so I need you to explain it to me. And it's on attachment B, page 5 of 10 of this report. And it talks about the retirement benefit payments against contributions, some kind of offset or something. I didn't understand it, so I need you to understand.
Okay, wait, I'm confused. That's
H.
H.
Is this there's an attachment.
Oh,
B.
H, recommendation follow-up. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I thought you were talking, I thought it was I had the
Other one.
wrong item.
We're finished with that. So attachment B, page 5.
Page 5. Okay.
Issue about retirement benefit payments against contributions. And what are those two issues about? Fiduciary and tax counsel are involved in it. It's overdue, medium risk, but I don't really understand what the issue is, and I wanted to get an explanation. That's all. Yeah, but it's in the report. It's attachment B. And that's a recommendation.
So would you like to address these?
Yeah.
Good morning again. Let me try to provide a little bit of explanation here. So we have at LACERA replacement benefit program is what we call it internally at LACERA. In compliance with SERL and the IRS tax laws, there are certain limits that are set in terms of the benefits that LACERA can pay and the benefits that the county has to pay. So what we do is we make sure that LACERA internally complies with the 415B limits in terms of that dollar amount, that benefit payment. The rest of the payment that is owed, the benefit that's due to the member, has to be paid by the county. So Richard and his team did an audit. They looked at our RPB program, or we call it the 415B program. Not sure if the replacement is necessarily the best word, but it's like a supplemental. It's a program to ensure that the member gets fully paid the benefit that's due. But there's a limit that LACERA, in terms of there's a dollar limit that LACERA can pay for that benefit. So these are mostly for the high earning, the high salary retirees, the high salary when they're employed, and then they have a higher benefit when they're retired. So LACERA can pay the maximum, the county has to pay the rest.
If I could clarify, perhaps, try to make it a little bit more clear. For some of the higher earning professionals in LA County, the IRS 415B limits the amount that the plan can pay in retirement benefits. But our job is to administer the promised benefit, right? So the county owes that, or the employer owes that promised benefit. So we are limited by the 415B amount, but we calculate the additional amount. So we will pay up to that amount through the pension plan. The additional amount the employer is responsible for paying. And so we provide some calculations and data to the county so that they know their obligation and they're responsible for paying it. So for some high paid employees or retirees, they'll receive two checks. So they'll receive their monthly LACERA check, and they'll receive a supplemental retirement allowance paid directly from the county. And so the internal audit took a look at this to make sure that we were administering that appropriately.
So these recommendations just relate to administrative issues that were found in that audit, and specifically this one, the first one is relating to the calculation, because as Ms. Guglielmo referred to LACERA doing some of the work to calculate those benefits. There's an administrative fee component that needs to be, right now we have a certain amount that we're collecting from the county. And the recommendation was to reevaluate what that should be. And so that we're following up on that. That's still due to be, well, it's overdue at this point. I don't know when what the new completion date is. I see the target due date of August 30th, 24. And similarly, the other recommendation is related to that. It's an administrative issue related to the way that the funds, because of this arrangement that we have, it's looking for a determination by Milliman on the practice.
Okay, so there's no liability on our part. People who fall in that category. Tell the county what they should pay.
And they pay the additional amounts.
And they give us an administrative fee for making the calculation.
That's right, exactly.
So you're just looking at whether or not the fee is an appropriate fee.
Exactly.
Okay, and you just haven't completed your calculation so that you could say your assessment so that you could validate that the calculation is correct or reasonable and considers everything it's supposed to.
So, so the issue, Trustee Moore, if I may, is whether or not what activities LACERA engages in to determine what that fee amount is. And internal audit, when they did this, looked and said, okay, we're charging the county a fee. What is that based on? And we really didn't have any information about what it was based on. So what should it be based on? So we started assessing that. And part of our assessment so far has been, we engaged tax counsel and fiduciary counsel to help us understand what's appropriate. But LACERA has an obligation to make this calculation regardless. So the feedback we received from outside counsel was, well, if LACERA is performing this work anyway, we should not be charging the county for that additional, we should not be charging the county an additional fee. So what we're trying to determine, are there any costs that LACERA is doing exclusively for the county that we would not normally do? And if so, is it material? Is it what is, we're still not really sure about where the initial fee came from. It's de minimis. But the concern that internal audit thought is, because it was de minimis, aren't there costs that we are incurring to determine this fee, which there are, that we should be charging? So we are incurring costs, but it appears that at least the lion's share, if not all of it, is our costs that we would normally incur.
Yeah. In other words, you would make the calculation anyway and then said, oh.
Well, we're obliged to make the calculation anyway.
If so, just as an example, if you make a calculation and said, oh, you should get 250,000, but we can only pay you 225. So the other 25 has to come from the county. We would do that anyway.
Right.
But it's been determined that there's a loss when that happens. There is a monetary cost to LACERA and the fund, even though it's our obligation. So my question is can that be fixed through contractual or?
Yes.
So there really isn't a loss to us because this is part of our normal duties.
Right.
As Mr. Moore has shared, if it's, I think it's maybe 280 is currently what it is, but let's say it's 280 and it's $300,000 that the actual calculation of the benefit requires, that extra $20,000 has to be made up somewhere, because technically the law requires, CERL requires that the member get the benefit they were promised. The IRS says, well, that's great, but you can't pay that benefit. And so there are laws within CERL that say, all right, in that particular case, you can create a replacement benefit plan, right? Which is the plan that the county administers. But regardless, LACERA has to first do the calculation of the required benefit to be paid. So we have to go through all of the normal processes that we do to determine what your retirement benefit is going to be. And then one of the steps that we do is we say, oh, wait, I can't pay $300,000. I can only pay $280,000, right? So then we simply send a notice to the county and says, okay, this is what you're going to have to cover. right? And then the county has their own set of forms that they have to have the member fill out, beneficiary forms, all of the same types of forms that we have. They have to collect. They have to set up a payment arrangement for them. The only additional step that we do is we will look at a way to spread out that difference so that it doesn't impact the member's ability to pay things for things like retiree healthcare benefits, right? Because those deductions, those premiums come from ours. So we may say, all right, we owe $280,000. He's owed $300,000. We're going to spread out that $20,000 over a period of time so that there's always money coming from LACERA to cover the cost of retiree healthcare, as an example. So that's not administratively burdensome. It's a small little calculation that we do. So there isn't really I understand there isn't really a loss to us to do this. We're required to do this anyway.
That's what I was getting. If there's a labor cost to do those calculations, I know we're obligated to do it, but if there's some way to recoup those fees for LACERA, not the loss of having to pay the difference between, but the actual labor costs for LACERA to do that, even though they're obligated to do it, is there. Take care of the pennies, take care of the dollars. I know it seems.
That's one of the reasons why we reached out to fiduciary counsel to say, okay, what is reasonable for us to do? Right. And the response we got from fiduciary counsel is it's reasonable for you to do those calculations. It's part of your job.
Right, gotcha.
Right, so it's not something that you necessarily need to seek reimbursement for.
So then
and probably it would cost us significant amount of money to try and figure out where that line is and track it, because we don't track the way that we do payroll. I don't track like a lawyer tracks, right? For those lawyers here, you track every hour of what you do, every second of what you do, and you bill your client. We don't have that and the capability of doing that. So that would require significant investment and time to be able to do it. And it's just not.
So, and then that is my question. So those higher disbursements, say, in our, the higher echelon of management, that's why that before that retirement benefit can be dispersed, that's why it has to have CEO scrutiny, right? So staff does their thing, they say, hey, we've hit that IRS cap, and then it goes to CEO and they have to look at it too for their as the plan administrator to make up the difference, right?
Yeah, we just tell them what that number is. So it literally, I would say to them, you should pay, I'm not going to do the math in my head.
$46,000.
Yeah, $46,000, and you should pay it in 12,000 increments of not even 12,000, whatever 12 divided by 46 would be, increments over the year. So that we're continuing to pay our certain benefit over the year so that they cover their retiree healthcare costs.
But that process, once you send that to them, it's just like a transfer. It's got to go from transfer to processing. Processing goes to payroll.
Once we send it to them, they take it from there completely. We're not involved after that point.
That's
right. So they send a package to the member. Again, it's like a retirement election package, where they, say, okay, well, give me your direct deposit account that you want it to go to. Give me your beneficiary. If they have, for example, if they have a dissolution, then they have to figure that out too. But that is all the county's job to handle completely. We're uninvolved in that part.
Okay, so it's just an administrative activity, as Mr. Bendel said, but why is the risk medium? Why that's one of the things
I will say this is maybe a management disagreement with internal audit. So I think at the time that this was raised, internal audit thought the risk was significant, right? Because without knowing the facts, right, it appears we're not being reimbursed. So without knowing those facts, it appears we're not being reimbursed. That's a problem for the fund.
Okay.
I think today we've determined that the risk is, from management's perspective, that the risk is really not any risk at all. But I don't think we've adequately, I think maybe our communication was a challenge here, where maybe that wasn't communicated effectively to internal audit, or that maybe they don't agree. I don't know, Richard. But I don't know that there's any more for us
Yeah.
do, but
I'm
from
actually
management's
good.
perspective, we don't think that there's a risk.
I'm good. If there wasn't medium risk and overdue, I wouldn't have asked the question.
Yeah, that was our initial assessment was that it's medium. It does say,
Yeah.
I'm not in disagreement that it sounds like
But it
it's a low
doesn't
risk.
sound like it's a big deal. It's,
Right.
you know, you kind of are going over the process to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. As long as you're doing what you're supposed to do and doing it correctly, if the county has an issue, maybe they'll come over and want to audit how you determine that amount. But since they're happy with and satisfied with your product, it looks like this is okay.
Yeah, so this will be closed out once we've documented everything.
And if I can have
I'm
one more
satisfied.
small detail, which will help with the risk issue. This is a diminishing risk, no matter what it is, because with PEPRA, people aren't going to reach that limit that the IRS has, right? So the PEPRA limit is much lower. And so people are never going to get to the limit. The PEPRA members, unless something were to change, are not ever likely to get to the limit where the IRS would be limiting, because the IRS actually increases their limit periodically over time. So, you know, for PEPRA members, which is becoming the bulk of our membership over time, you know, it's a non-issue.
No one will
And it's
ever-
actually prohibited by PEPRA. You can't have a replacement benefit plan, if I remember correctly, under the PEPRA regulation.
Right. At some point, everyone will be limited to the PEPRA limit, and that
Mhm.
won't even be an issue.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
correct.
great. Well, I learned something new today.
Y'all did.
There is one element.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, you'll never get there.
Mr. Johnson?
Who has, Larry, go ahead.
So there is, however, I think we didn't talk about is, you know, some impact on the accounting area, right? And financial reporting. It's on page 149 of our financial report today. It explains that replacement benefit. And there's also the accounting for the offset, right, that occurs, that deduction from the county contribution. And so maybe there's something there with regards to administrative fees as well to look at.
I think that's the element that's outstanding, is determining what that should be in comparison to what they're charging right now. So that's why it's still out here. That's a very good point. That component of it needs to be addressed in terms of what that fee should be. So as soon as we get that, this will be closed out. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so next, do you have 2 verbal updates? Richard, is that where we're at?
I think,
Hey,
no,
no.
well, let's see. I covered the one, which was the staffing. The other one is the audits not at the discretion of the committee or internal audit. And the
Okay.
only thing I'm aware of is Siegel, our healthcare consultant, is doing their annual claims audits of the providers, of the healthcare providers. And that's an annual audit that's being done, and that's underway right now for the year. But that's all I have.
Okay. All right, with that, I think we'll go into, wait a minute, consultant comments, staff review. No comments, Larry?
Nope.
Okay.
No items for staff review. It was already mentioned in the motion, the one you're speaking of.
Okay. So future agenda items, good for the order? Everybody's good for the order? So I think might be time that we recognize that this is Vivian's last meeting. She's an icon. I don't even know how many years, decades you've been on the boards and helping us through all the processes, and you are going to be sorely, sorely missed. Anyway, I wanted to give everybody a chance to you know, address you and say congratulations and having fun on your journey. You worked 42 years, right? 40 years with the county.
1.5 months.
And 1.5 months. Yeah. So I think I'm going to turn over to me. Mhm. Yeah.
Well, it has been, you know, a great pleasure and an honor to work with Trustee Vivian Gray. And my mentorship started with Trustee Herman Santos, and then follow it, get to know you, and then along that, like both you know, you have very different approach, you know, come from the same place and the caring for the membership. So I really appreciate getting to, you know, learn from you, different approach from the other mentor, Herman Santos. And then I always thought like you have so much like care, you know, grace and patience, wisdom, you know, like with you. And sometimes I think maybe that's like the maturity of the age, you know, I'm hoping one day I get there, you know, with the age getting there. But after thinking through, I think a lot of it is not that, it's you, it's who you are, uniquely your characters, you know, your personality. So I really admire that, and I hope I learn to grow into you, like a role model like you. So as a member, thank you for your service, you know, amazing service on this board, you know, everyone benefit from it. So members know that the pension fund's in good hands when you're on the board. So thank you. Yeah.
Say something real
Yes,
quick.
please,
I
please.
want to say to staff, particularly in this particular meeting and all the work that you've done, and the follow-up is amazing, and I appreciate that of the audit staff and Richard. I mean, you do really good job. I mean, I think that in the past, as I recall, there was always a little something we wanted more of. Now it's like, well, what do we ask now? You've done it all, and I truly appreciate staff. Richard, you had a whole lot on your shoulders, and I appreciate all that you do with staff and organizing all of this and looking at all the reports. I mean, I read through them because I didn't have anything else to do, but I read through everything that was submitted, and I didn't really have any questions or any additions. And I think that particular position that I have is attributable to the work that staff has done, legal department, audit, and more importantly, to be explained how things work and how we do it. That's very important to me, and I really appreciate it. So when I get my check every month, I'm going to be very happy to know that where it's coming from is working really well. So thank you to everyone.
Well, thank you to you for your great contributions to the audit committee. And I think the fact that the committee has grown as well as staff has grown. And when you say staff, I'm putting it all behind me. I get to sit up front here and take the credit, but the credit's not due to me, it's due to the team. And really, it's just great to see how we have evolved as a team, and the committee has evolved. The fact that you care so much, the great conversations we've had today, I think it's a testament to the culture of the organization that we want to be better, and we're going to miss you. So thank you for all your contributions.
Thank you.
So good of the order, we're all good. So we have an executive session, correct? So 5 minutes,
That's right.
right?
Okay.
Yes, that would be perfect.